Yes.
So hi everyone and welcome to this discussion today. My name is Amrita Chaudhary and I represent CCAOI. So on behalf of CCAOI and Grade Ace, I welcome you to this online interactive discussion, Match On. We want to discuss the proposed amendments in the IT Rules 2021 in context of online gaming and then deliberate on the path forward to make the gaming industry reach its true potential, while we also try to address the challenges, risks, and harms. So this session is being live streamed and recorded. And our objective for arranging this discussion is not only to discuss and provide stakeholders and the community a better understanding of what the proposed amendments propose, but and the aspects of the amendment which needs to be refined, but also encourage the stakeholders to make submissions within the deadline. And also to discuss at large what the online gaming regulations should be. So as an outcome of the discussion, a report would be prepared with the key takeaways and suggestions, which would be circulated to the government and other decision makers and stakeholders with our submission. And today we have an eclectic panel of distinguished speakers who will provide their perspectives on this topic. But Rahul from Grade Ace would share more on it. Today Rahul and I both would be co-moderating this discussion, and we have Samriddhi who is actually going to be rapporteuring for this session. And I would request everyone to mute yourself if you're not speaking, as else we have some audio issues. If you have any queries, you can put it on the chat and you can mark it as query. And if you have any comments, you can share it, mention comments and share. We would have an interactive session, so we will, at that point of time, you can raise your hand and we would be asking you to speak, but do mention your name and affiliation. We encourage you to participate and share your views, but do be respectful and courteous to each other, even if your views differ, because we do have differing views and that's how it is. No abusive language or personal attacks would be tolerated. And if you're not speaking, please keep your mic muted. And with this, Rahul, I forward it to you so that you can share more on who the speakers are and what the draft agenda looks like, though Samriddhi has shared it in the chat.
Thanks, Amrita. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this discussion, Match On, where we intend to discuss the aspects of online gaming and how the space has evolved over time. What are the regulatory aspects and what can we look forward towards in terms of putting in place nuanced provisions in regulatory ecosystem so that there is a win-win ecosystem for all the players. So today, the format we have chosen for this is more like a masterclass where we are going to get some overview by Salone Sehgal from Lumikai, who will provide her views on the overall gaming landscape ecosystem as it currently stands and where we tend to go from here in next 5-10 years and like what is a growth like. Although like you would have seen the number of gaming players and both the companies overshoot in past few years, and that trend is not just likely to grow exponentially, but it's going to compound very significantly if we have the right ecosystem in place. Then we have asked Rachna, who is a gaming and tech lawyer, to provide the overview of what is the existing regulatory landscape for us in India in terms of what the constitution talks about it, what the central laws are, what the state laws are, what those rules are, what are some of the court judgments, to just provide you with a snapshot on where we stand today, minus the draft rules which have been provisioned. Now we also invited Mr. Rakesh Maheshwari from MHA to come and talk about the GOI view and his sharing his perspective on why these rules are the way they are and why we see them and what can we look forward in terms of going forward in terms of the regulatory scape at a larger scale So unfortunately, Mr. Maheshwari has expressed his inability to currently join, but has conveyed his wishes, and we hope that if he's able to join for the last 10 minutes, and then we can ask him to give some remarks. But if not, then I think we can go back with them with the recommendations that we have in place post this discussion. And then we move on to Nachiket, who is going to talk about the overall amendments to the IT Intermediate Rules 2021, which have been proposed and which forms the basis of the discussions that we are having now. What we understand is that these rules have been drafted keeping in mind what the existing regulatory ecosystem and challenges were, not trying to grab the bull by its horn, but rather looking at it in a more nuanced way to come up with provisions which can be an additional fit to the ecosystem, so that there is some certainty provided to the operating players in the ecosystem, and then the other nuances, whether it is going to be regulated by state level, what gambling laws come into play, etc. Those things will continue to play on. But this is like a step moving forward. And then we have an excellent panel of speakers who are going to share their perspective from a variety of views. So we have Mr. Shailendra Vikram Singh, who has been with MHA for long and looked at aspects of cyber tech data from all aspects and has contributed to many committees on the aspects. So gaming is one such area which also has been a significantly focused area for the government as part of the AVGC initiatives. Plus, we also saw an intermediate ministerial task force which deliberated on these aspects and provided some of the recommendations. So given that this subject enjoys much attention from the policymakers, the regulators, the players, the gaming companies, and the public policy professionals, and we have seen how this whole debate and discussions around this has exploded in the past few months. And in last few days itself, we have seen multiple discussions happening on the subject. We also have Dr. Triveni Singh from UP Police, who is an SP with the Special Task Force, who is going to talk about some of the challenges with respect to gaming companies, especially in relation to betting and the challenges in cybercrime investigations. Then we have Shivani, who is going to talk about it from an esports player welfare association, what the challenges for the players are, how can harms be mitigated, and etc., like the overall concerns from a community viewpoint. And then we have Saumya, who is co-founder of Winzo, who is going to talk about her perspective from a gaming company perspective on how these things are. Plus, we have a stellar line of panelists, the lawyers, who are going to talk about in a more nuanced way what are the issues and challenges with the way the regulatory landscape is currently set up. Is the intermediary regulatory framework the right way to approach this current model? What can be the most optimum way? And if we go ahead with the intermediate models, so what can be the nuanced tweaks that we can bring to make it better suited for making this law operational? So we have Abhishek Malhotra from TMT Law Practice. We have Gowree Gokhale from Nishith Desai Associates, and we have had opportunity to work with Gowree for various initiatives in the past. We also have Ranjana Adhikari from Indus Law, and she is going to share her perspective on the aspects as we go into the stakeholder perspective moderated discussion. And then we open the floor. We invite comments and inputs and suggestions from the stakeholders, but we have a few who have expressed their willingness and opportunity, and we have invited them to come and share their views. So we have Kazim Rizvi, who is founder of The Dialogue, and he also held the discussion on the subject yesterday, which was attended by large players. There were a lot of issues raised. We see a lot of open questions that still prevail. Then we also have Deepro Guha from the Quantum Hub. Again, they also held a discussion on the subject on Tuesday. And again, yeah, that also led to discussions on nuanced topics. But again, some open questions that are still unaddressed. And we also have Sarvajit Singh from the Mobile Premier League, who is going to share his views on how they stand. Plus, then the floor will be open to all the participants to share their views and inputs on how we can move ahead in terms of discussing this space, find out what are the areas of convergence where we need certain clarity, and what are the ways forward and recommendations that we can propose as part of the recommendations that we finalize as part of the report. And then we sort of summarize the discussion and move ahead. So before I pass on the baton to Salone, so as we have seen on how gaming's apps in particular have become very popular in last few years. And I'll just give one figure. When we had this border confrontation with China, there were few apps which were banned, including gaming app. And PUBG was one of the apps which was part of the ban. And when PUBG made a comeback, it saw more than 5 crore downloads in just over 24 hours. And that tells you this craze and demand it had built amongst youth. And with the enhanced computing power through in form of mobile phones increasing and then getting proliferated, and then we have 5G coming up. So it's going to be a completely different landscape in terms of how gaming ecosystem evolves, operates, and how players engage in this space. So we'll have much more users, much more gaming companies. So to talk about it, we invite Salone to share her views. Over to you, Salone.
Yeah. Rahul, just one moment. I will share my screen because Salone has a presentation. Give me a moment, Salone. I hope you can see this. I will just put it on screen share mode.
Yes, we see it. Thank you so much, Amrita. Well, thank you so much, Amrita and Rahul, for having me. It's my pleasure, and it's great to see both public, private, as well as the think tanks coming together to talk about gaming as an industry. Just as a quick introduction, I'm Salone Sehgal. I'm the founding general partner of Lumikai Fund. We're India's first sector-focused gaming and interactive media fund. So we invest only in this as an asset class. Just to give you a little bit of context behind the research and the methodology and the partners associated with this as well, is this is what we attempted to do with the State of India Gaming Report, and we issue an annual report, and we did this last year as well, is to essentially provide a very detailed view of the India gaming market, looking at the various components, looking at the various sub-sectors, the sub-verticals, and to shed light and insights on player behavior, gamer behavior, monetization, investments, and M&A trends. We support this with primary as well as secondary research. In our primary research, we actually survey 2,500 plus smartphone users and gamers to be able to extrapolate results around player behavior, and as well as doing very extensive secondary research, looking at databases, as well as doing very detailed analytics, as well as speaking to industry experts and collating results from companies who are currently within the gaming ecosystem, and also adding to it Lumikai proprietary research. Just as an opening word of why gaming is an asset class and why gaming is in a larger context is so critical for the India market, is if you look at anywhere in the world, there have now been two major shifts which have been driving the use case for gaming. There have been technological shifts which have resulted in a very big paradigm shift in terms of usage of entertainment as a medium, along with demographic shifts where you have more and more people adopting to more immersive forms of entertainment. And gaming is no longer a fringe activity. It is no longer played by a certain demographic. The games have become much more ubiquitous. And for countries, excellence is gaming. In gaming often means standing at the vanguard of driving innovation. So as a sector, this is deeply, deeply critical. And as we've seen the emergence of gaming in the US and Japan, Taiwan, China, it is also similarly great that we are now starting to take cognizance of gaming and its criticality to just Indian tech. In terms of just a quick overview of what India's gaming market looks like, as per our estimates, India's gaming market hit $2.6 billion in FY 2022, which is essentially the period ending March 2022. And we project over the next few years, it's expected to hit north of $8.6 billion. We'll slice the, maybe we can stay on the executive summary, Amrita, for a minute. We'll slice the sector, the overall industry down into key components of real money gaming, as well as mid-core gaming and casual gaming. But broadly, what we've seen is that the industry is accelerating almost at a 30% growth rate year on year. Similarly, in terms of usage and gamer numbers and market size, there are 507 million Indian gamers, which have gone up from the previous year, 450 million. If you recall, over the last 3-4 years, after the, let's say, geofication of the internet, because of very low data rates, the largest beneficiaries of low and cheap data and speed of data has actually been video content and gaming. And that has been demonstrated in demand of gaming, and gaming becoming much more ever present, especially with the advent of COVID, people staying at home, pandemic stress resulted in people adopting gaming as a pastime. Alongside that, we also see emergence of paying behavior. There are 120 million paying users in FY22 as per our studies, which also represents a 24% conversion rate. And both revenue, supply of games, and there is a higher willingness and propensity to pay from the Indian consumer and gamer that we see. India also, interestingly, has demonstrated a very, very strong appetite for consuming games, both local as well as global. India accounted for 15 billion gaming downloads in FY22. It had actually the highest share of game downloads, beating countries like US and China. Games played in India had 2 billion cumulative monthly active users in FY 2022, which also demonstrates the depth of the India market. And this is across a consolidation of genres as well. As we mentioned, the market is exhibiting promising monetization trends. This is a little bit different from the narrative that we have potentially heard about the India market, about Indian gamers not monetizing. However, research shows that the average revenue per paying user per gamer has increased to $20 per year, which has grown from 11% from $16 the previous year. And Indians actually demonstrate the fastest new paying users being added on a monthly basis anywhere in the world. We also have some stats around average time spent by Indian gamers. We see anywhere between 9 to 11 hours being spent on gaming across genres. We've also, over the course of the last 2 years, seen a tremendous amount of investor interest in the Indian gaming market. There have been north of $2.8 billion invested in by domestic as well as global investors in Indian games companies. There is a notable stat, which is not on this slide, is also over the course of the last 2 years, as a sector focused fund, we have now seen over 1,300 plus startups in the gaming and interactive ecosystem. So hence also indicating a very strong supply of talent and entrepreneurial pool. We can quickly move on to the next slide. So this is essentially a slice down and a breakdown of how categories are impacting gaming, and what is essentially breakdown of gaming in terms of business model and monetization model. So in terms of category, RMG or real money gaming is the largest component, which constitutes 57% of the Indian games market. However, very, very interestingly, we see casual, hyper-casual, mid-core games actually progressing and growing at a much faster pace. In fact, we foresee that they're growing at a much faster pace than real money games. And obviously, last year, we saw the emergence of Battlegrounds Mobile, India, Free Fire. These are much more immersive forms of entertainment, which have gained a lot more popularity amongst the younger generations and younger demographic. Similarly, we see while RMG has a large component of the total revenue pool, we're also seeing a noticeable uptick in monetization in terms of in-app purchase behavior, ad revenue, and other forms of monetization, which is essentially implying that the slice of real money gaming revenues, while it may increase, the largest part of the growth is going to come from other forms of monetization and other forms of gaming. And which is very important to recognize that gaming is far broader and has much more depth and breadth than is previously perceived. Real money gaming is only one aspect of gaming. There are also content, cutting edge technology, platforms, which are also constituting the gaming universe. And just the last slide, as I touched upon, India has obviously demonstrated a very deep demand for mobile games. India gaming is largely mobile first. India's gamers are largely smartphone users, and obviously with the advent and the proliferation of smartphone growth, we've seen gaming usage also increase in that linear fashion. We have seen a demonstration of paying capacity, where we've drawn up a funnel where we're seeing almost a 24% conversion to paying users with a very high propensity to pay with respect to both across genres and categories of gaming, whether it's real money gaming, whether it's mid-core gaming, even to an extent casual games. And mobile games downloads in India hit 15 billion in FY 2022. It was the fastest growing and the largest market of any in comparison to the world. And number of gaming companies, content studios, building games companies we've seen a geometric increase in the number of entrepreneurs and talent which has been building in this space. Just as closing words, we have to appreciate and realize that India gaming is at a very, very critical juncture at this point of time. We've clearly seen some inflection markers. We're clearly seeing some very high potential for growth. And if India has to emerge itself as the technological superpower, gaming is going to be standing at the vanguard of it. So one has to balance out regulation with respect to encouraging innovation. So any such regulations, norms, and frameworks need to take into cognizance that the market and the ecosystem is still very early. There is still a lot of startups being incubated, and as a result of which, at the early stage of startups, that it is very important for them to be agile. It is very important for them to have ease of doing business. It is very important for these companies to be able to move swiftly, build swiftly, and as a result of which one has to balance out both the player protection, regulation, along with encouraging innovation and startup agility. And India is at an incredibly critical stage, and where we're seeing incredibly fast growth in India gaming. And we would love to see, and obviously it is fantastic to see this policy support and to see the government recognize gaming and making it mainstream. And we would love to see more of that to continue. So,
thank you, Salone. So thank you for the detailed presentation and presenting your study with detailed stats. These are really helpful. So one of the figures that you talked about was we have close to about 1,300 gaming companies. Did we get this correct?
900 gaming studios and 1,300 across that we have evaluated as a fund. There are probably many more. But that's across the entire ecosystem of gaming and interactive, which has content plays, platforms, tools, tech, infrastructure, as well as frontier tech. There are probably many more.
All right, thank you. So that's a pretty encouraging number. And have these numbers sort of exploded in last 2-3 years in your view?
Absolutely. Yeah. Even with game development studios, you can see the statistics. We've gone from, let's say, 25-30 studios over the last 5 years to now over 900. So there has been a geometric explosion in the number of companies which are being built in the space, the talent which is building and just bold visions of and entrepreneurial spirit that we've seen, especially over the last 2 to 3 years.
And these developments are happening not just for Indian gaming companies, but I'm assuming that it's global, right? It
is global. So gaming becoming mainstream is now global. Gaming globally is a 200 billion plus industry. And there are now 30 plus global gaming specialized investors who invest in gaming as an asset class. So as an asset class as well is being recognized. But, as I mentioned before, technology shifts as well as demographic shifts have really made gaming as a subculture very, very mainstream. So, it's almost as ubiquitous as watching movies. So, there is, earlier there would be people who'd say, well, are you a gamer and are you a gamer? But nobody says, are you a movieer? Because it's so ubiquitous. And this is essentially what is happening to gaming as well.
And that's across the age group, gender,
across age group, across gender, across demographics, across cultures, in fact, as well.
All right. So thank you so much, Salone. Over to you, Amrita.
Thank you so much, Salone, for actually showing the landscape, the broader landscape, that what we have and what we need to encourage to grow. That is why we wanted you to give this, because you've done this study to share, how this ecosystem is and the kind of, opportunities it has for everyone. So we have Rachna next, Rachna Shroff. She is a lawyer. She looks at gaming law. And Rachna would be actually sharing with us that, given the opportunities this sector has, what are the current regulations, etc., which is prevalent, and what has led to the genesis of these discussions. Rachna, over to you if you want to share the screen.
Thank you, Amrita. I'll start sharing my screen and please let me know if the screen is visible to you. Is it visible?
Yes.
Yes, Rachna, we can see it.
So thank you for having me here, Amrita and Rahul. It's a pleasure to share this platform with all the people from the industry from whom I've directly, indirectly interacted with and learned so much. And it's great to share the platform today with them. So what I speak of, and thank you, Salone, for giving us those numbers and stats, is that while working as an in-house counsel for the gaming company for 5 years, that is what we thrive on. And that is what has always given us a lot of hope that, yes, we are making the right moves and this industry is here to stay. So while looking at how did the gaming industry all shaped up, where does it find its base, what is the entire regulatory affair in India in terms of gaming, let's look at it. So these numbers have already been spoken by Salone. I'll skip this and I will move ahead. And so first, when we think about gaming, the question gaming, gambling, it appears together, and we want to understand where does it find its base, basically. So the Constitution under Article 246 has been divided in the center in the state, and there it says that betting and gambling, has been placed under 7th Schedule, List 2, Entry 34. This is very technical, but yes, there is no pleading which goes before the court without this mention. And Public Gambling Act is the act where, we all have been as gaming lawyers working with the help of this act, which is actually a pre-independence act. And we've really been saying that it has been very outdated. And in today's term, I should say, it doesn't meet with the requirement or doesn't deals with any kind of issues that is being faced in this technological area. This act gave an exception of the game of skills, and game of skill led to a lot of help in running the online gaming sector. So while the Gaming Act was there, there were a few judgments which happened in the initial days of gaming, and they formed the basis for the gaming industry to thrive when they were really challenged with a lot of litigations before different courts till the apex. So this one of the most important judgments, which I would say is the R&D Chamarbagala, which I think is a Bible to all the gaming lawyers, where what has happened that this particular case stated that, under Article 9(1)(g), it is said that, okay, it is a business activity. If there is found that a game which is being played and if there is some money earned over it, it will be okay. And it will be not termed as, gambling or cheating or anything as such, which is in the negative connotation, if the dominant factor test it passes. And what was the dominant factor test? It was simply based that if there is higher relevance, or while determining that if the game has a higher relevance of skill rather than chance, then it will be termed as a game of skill. And in such games, it would be accorded the sanctity of being a business, and it should be afforded protection under Article 19(1)(g), and the business can run it. So the exercise of judgment, discretion, and reason were also considered as factors to determine a game as a game of skill. And this became, the base for the gaming industry to run games of skill. Moving ahead, there were other two judgments which we will look at. This is state of Andhra Pradesh and Satyanarayana case. So in the industry, it is just spoken as the Satyanarayana case. Here, the court was listening in relation to Rummy, and it said that the game which involves skills is memorizing the fall of the cards, holding them, and discarding them sufficiently qualifies as a game of skill for the purpose of this gaming or gambling. Why did it say so? Basically, it is saying that, do you see that even if there is a stance of chance, but there is also so much of stances of instances of skill, that you're memorizing those cards, you're holding them, and you're discarding them. And on what basis are you doing them? You're using your discretion, you are analyzing, you are strategizing, right? So that's a skill, and it's not a chance. And wherever there is preponderance of skill over chance, it will be termed as a game of skill. And this case also formed the base for the gaming industry. And the last one, if I can say so, has been K.R. Lakshmanan, which was versus the state of Tamil Nadu. It was based on the legality of betting on horse race, which said, this is very interesting paragraph, and I would like to read it, that although all games may necessarily involve some element of chance, a game can be said to be one of skill when the success of a player depends principally upon the superior knowledge, training, attention, adroitness, experience of the player, even if the element of chance necessarily cannot entirely be eliminated from it. Here, the term mere skill was interpreted as an exemption. So do you see the word superior knowledge, training, attention, adroitness, and experience of the player was given far more importance in this paragraph. And it clearly set out that if these are the skills, if these are the qualifications found, then of course it is a game of skill. And this word mere skill was interpreted, which is found in the definition under the Act, that what is mere skill? That mere skill was defined that if there is mere skill over chance, then please note that that particular game is exempted and doesn't fall into the category of gambling. So these three case laws, I say, are the Bible. Any gaming lawyers who are there, they just know the in and out of these laws. These judgments. Oh, yes. So if we look at the current or the existing regulatory framework, certainly in the very recent, we are looking at in this today's discussion, we're going to look at that bill or the draft rules that is speaking about incorporating the online gaming industry. But sadly enough, we do not have a particular law in this industry till date. We're still thriving under Public Gambling Act, which is too outdated. We are thriving on IT, data protection, but there's all still to shape up. And the result of this has been that since this has been state-adopted act, and every state has taken it up on themselves, these last 2-3 years have been very challenging for this industry because it was booming on one side in terms of number, gamers, revenue. On the other side, it faced a lot of challenges in terms of regulations, ordinances, orders, and judgments. And this is where different states who came up with different banning of the online forms of game without even understanding whether they are game of skill or whether they are game of chance. And there has been a lot of litigation around it. And one such mention, which is still struggling, and you can just read about it. It's an ongoing issue where the Tamil Nadu gaming and police law was amended, and they said we're going to ban all form of online gaming. And they had the reason saying that the addiction rate was very high. There was a lot of there was high rate of suicide happening in the that particular state. So they went and they said this is forming because of the reason of this particular gaming that is happening. So they moved to the courts and they said we want a ban. But however, when the opposite side came up to the Madras High Court, it struck down a part of it, and it says that the order, it's not going to ban the entire part of it. There will be a certain part which will be, removed. And then this has been still challenged, and it is pending before the Supreme Court. But yes, the Tamil Nadu government is strong enough on its stand for the reasons of stating that there has been a lot of suicide due to gaming, and we're still waiting for the Supreme Court to come up on this. And let's see what the judgment is like. Similarly, it happened in the case of Kerala, that in February 2021, the government of Kerala amended their act and they banned online rummy, whereas rummy is one of the games where the Supreme Court has given its decision saying that it's a game of skill. And however, this amendment is challenged by various companies, and the Kerala High Court proceeded to quash the amendment. And then, if I'm right, subject to correction, this is also pending before the Supreme Court. So if I could say that this is the, in short, the existing regulatory framework where, of course, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, during the times of COVID, they also came up with their banning compositions. And those were also a challenge for this industry. But yes, if you have to look, say, is there any particular law? A particular law, sadly, no. Public Gambling Act doesn't provide much to it in today's technological, digital departments that we are dealing with as a gaming lawyer, as a gaming industry and a sector. But yes, we are very hopeful where, as we have a nodal ministry which has come up, as the draft guidelines are coming up. And then, we, of course, we also knew about the online bill or regulation gaming bill which came up. We still to see the light, but we just hope that we will soon have a particular law which will speak about the online gaming sector. Thank you, Amrita. That's from my side.
Thank you, Rachna. There was a question, as in, if you could take it up in the chat also, it's fine. One is, how does the law look at giving actual prizes, say a bike at the end of the game? Just for all the audience, she was speaking about the existing laws. What now we will be actually having Nachiket do is speak about what the government proposes next. So Akshay and Lokesh, do you want Rachna to address these questions, or do you want Rachna and others to address it after we look at what the amendments propose? You can put it in the chat which way you want it to go. Okay, Rachna to answer it. Lokesh has a question that, does it mean that even casinos will be, his question is, with this, should casinos also be legal in India?
Oh, that's a separate department, Lokesh, altogether, because what I have seen while working as an in-house counsel with gaming companies, I've learned that these casinos have a different way of being treated by separate kind of governments. So it is not yet legal in India, but yes, with time we do not know if it would be legalized. See, there is always the demand from the industry, from the sector to legalize it, as there are many added factors to it of bringing a lot of revenue, a lot of tax revenue to the government, employment. Yeah, there are a lot of added factors. But right now is all I can say, that we have to wait and watch, because the legalization is not there. There is onshore and offshore trouble and shuffle that is always, there is a fight going on in that sector. But yes, the casinos are operating. They're operating not on the land, but on the seas. But I would really say in this terms that let's wait and watch and see what happens. Will it be legalized in India ever?
Thank you so much, Rachna. We would like you to stay, and in case later you want to comment. Now I bring in Nachiket, who is from Krida Legal. Nachiket, can you give us an overview of what the amendments propose and where the community is supposed to be actually commenting upon?
Sure. I'll just share my screen. One second. Just 1 second, sir.
And while Nachiket does that, so as you would be aware, the online gaming as a subject wasn't in the list of business, as the experts have talked about it. But in the amendment to the business rules, the matters related to online gaming were brought under the Ministry of Information Technology, and esports as part of the multi-sports event under the Department of Sports, which falls under the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports. So that needed some work in terms of clarification on what would regulate what. And then after this notification was put out, we saw the Ministry of IT and Technology putting out this draft rules, amendment to the Intermediary 2021 rules in context to the online gaming. And to talk about it, we have Nachiket.
Thanks, Rahul. Thanks, Amrita. First of all, I would like to thank both of you for having me here. And I would like to thank Rachna and Salone for giving us insight in relation to the gaming market and the overview of the existing gaming laws. So this is my presentation on the proposed amendments to the IT rules. I'm going to keep it, I'll try and keep it short, but it's going to be a technical discussion because in the nature of how the amendments have been proposed. So just to give a brief background, exactly as how Rahul said, initially gaming and gambling was a state subject. It still is technically, but the government of India recently amended the allocation of business rules on 23rd of December and allocated the businesses related to online gaming as to MHA, so that MHA can be the nodal ministry to frame policies with regard to the same. And within a week of MHA becoming the nodal ministry, the draft amendments have been proposed and public comments have been invited till 17 January. And the overall objective of these amendments is to bring online pay-to-play games under the scope of the IT rules and to safeguard users from potential harm. Now, the term potential harm is very interesting because it has not been defined under the IT rules, but we'll look more on that to come. So now the key amendments that have been proposed is that online games have been defined as games offered via the internet and accessible through a computer resource, wherein the user makes a deposit of cash or kind with the expectation of winning. Now there's a secondary explanation to this, which means that the term winnings will be considered to be a prize in cash or kind that will be distributed to the user based on their performance in the online game. So initially, it seems that this is essentially only for games of skill because the winnings is going to be dependent upon the performance of a user in any online game. Then Rule 21QB has been proposed to be inserted, which will define online gaming intermediaries as any intermediary under the IT rules, which provides one or more kinds of online games to users. Furthermore, there are existing obligations that intermediaries are supposed to observe, due diligence, which are also known as the due diligence obligations. And those obligations have been proposed to be extended to online gaming intermediaries, since they have also been defined as a separate intermediary. Then we have Rule 31B, 9 and 10, which have been proposed to be substituted, which include that the rules, privacy policy, the user agreement of online gaming intermediaries should inform the users of such intermediaries that they should not host, display, modify, upload, publish, or share any information that is either in the nature of an online game, which will run foul of any of the existing laws, or information that is in violation of any law for the time being in force. Then we have Rule 31MA, which is proposed to be inserted, whereby there's a requirement that any online gaming intermediary that is offering online games to its users should get mandatory certifications from a self-regulatory body. Now, the composition, we'll come to the composition of the self-regulatory body in due course, but so the certification will apply for each online gaming intermediary as well as for every game that the online gaming intermediary proposes to offer to its users. And this requirement for getting certification of registration from the SRB, which is a term that I'm just defining here for ease, is that this requirement will become applicable after the expiry of a period of 3 months from the date of commencement of the proposed amendments. And as we know, the proposed amendments are just a proposal right now; they have not been enacted, so we have time. Then we have Rule 4A, which has been proposed to be inserted to have additional due diligence obligations to be imposed upon gaming regulators, essentially, gaming companies rather. So this will include displaying a visible mark of registration of the intermediary as well as all games with the respective self-regulatory body. Then the rules and the various documents in relation to the intermediary will have to inform the users about the refund policies, the manner in which winnings are going to be distributed, and what fees will be payable by a user for participating in a particular game. Then the same document should also contain disclaimers about financial loss and the risk of addiction by just mere participation in online games, because we have recently seen an uptick in cases wherein violent crimes have been committed and online games have been blamed for the reason of those crimes being committed. Therefore, these disclaimers are absolutely necessary. Then we also talk about the amendments also talk about the KYC procedure for that has to be followed by the intermediaries for user registration process. And there's also a side note here that this KYC procedure also needs to be similar to the procedure adopted by the RBI because these games are largely going to be real money games. Then we have the documents of the intermediary should also provide for what measures have been taken by the intermediary to ensure that the deposits made by the users are protected and are not subject to fraud. And it should the document should also show what is the policy framework of the self-regulatory body that the intermediary has been registered with and which has provided the certification to the intermediary. And so the same, and obviously there's also a growing concern that most of these websites have bots or the games are rigged. Therefore, all intermediaries must also prominently display on their mobile website or mobile app or their website the fact that these games do not have any chance of being rigged, and they should have a random number generation certificate and a no-bot certificate, both of which should be issued by bodies of repute. So it's not like any random body can go ahead and issue such certificates. Then the intermediary should also provide for identification and verification of the users and their identities at the commencement of a user account creation relationship in relation to any online game. And they should also provide for a system to have voluntary account verification by users through various methods, one of the most common of which is through their mobile phones. Then, and for verified users, there should be a verifiable tick, suppose like a tick, which is available on, say, Twitter right now. Then these intermediaries are also required to appoint grievance officers and a chief compliance officer. Now, the grievance officer's responsibilities are already present in the existing IT rules, so that is the same. Whereas, however, the chief compliance officer needs to be a key managerial personnel of the intermediary or a senior employee, and he shall be liable for the compliance of the intermediary with the existing act as well as any rules made thereunder. And he will also be held liable in instances where the intermediary does not comply with the act or rules. And the chief compliance officer will further also be responsible for coordination with law enforcement agencies and compliance of any orders issued by them. Then we have the fact that the online gaming intermediaries must also provide a system for grievance redressal that users can raise with these intermediaries for violations of any sort that have been committed by the intermediaries under the act. Like suppose they don't follow their obligations, then the users should have a mechanism to raise the same, and the users should also be able to track their complaints and grievances. And ideally, these grievances should all be resolved in a time-bound manner. Further, we have the fact that online gaming intermediaries also have an obligation of providing information or assistance to any government agency which has the responsibility of protecting or investigating cybersecurity incidents. Now, there already was an existing obligation on intermediaries, but the window for providing the same was 72 hours. Now, the proposed amendments say that this window for online gaming intermediaries is 24 hours. So that is something that needs to be kept in mind. And also this entire obligations under 4A will also be applicable post expiry of a period of 3 months from the commencement of the proposed amendment. Now, Rule 4B has similarly also been proposed to be inserted, which calls for the establishment of one or more self-regulatory bodies. Now, this is where it gets a bit dicey, because there exists the possibility that there will be multiple self-regulatory bodies, which is also the case right now. But and those bodies will have their own methodologies for registering games. So the risk of there not being any uniform policy for registration of games or gaming intermediaries exists. So now the SRBs will also have the additional responsibility of evolving a framework to ensure that the games that they are registering do not run foul of Section 69A of the IT Act, which is the Information and Technology Act. Now, for those who do not know, Section 69A of the IT Act gives the government a power to discontinue data or basically ban websites or apps which they feel are going to affect the sovereignty and defense of India as a nation or affect our relations with other sovereign countries. So it is interesting that the SRBs have been given the responsibility of evolving a framework here, such that they'll have to ensure that games are not only compliant with and not running foul of Section 69A, but they'll also need to keep evolving the framework as time passes. Now, 4B also calls for registration of the self-regulating body with MeitY, and these self-regulatory bodies can either be Section 8 companies formed by gaming intermediaries under the Companies Act, or a society under the Societies Registration. And while considering the applications by these SRBs for getting registered with itself, MeitY will consider a number of criteria which are listed here, which is the number of gaming intermediaries who are already existing members of the SRB, the track record of the SRB with respect to promotion of responsible online gaming, the general repute, absence of conflict of interest, and relevance and suitability of the members of the governing body or the board of directors of such SRB. And then the Rule 4B further talks about the composition of the SRB board of directors, which includes eminent people from the gaming industry or sports or entertainment, depending on what is. Then further, they have any individual representing online gamers. They also have an individual. It is all of these are suggestive. This list is absolutely suggestive. However, it is preferred that it should be in this manner. And interestingly, it can be seen here that there will also be an individual nominated by the central government who has practical experience in public policy, public administration, law enforcement, or public finance, who should ideally be a member of the board of director or the governing body of such an SRB that is seeking to be registered with METI. And the SRB, while along with its application, should also provide its articles of association or bylaws to prove the fact that it can function independently and at arm's length from its members, so that it does not get influenced by the members in terms of registering the members themselves or registering the games provided by the members. And obviously the key component here is that the applicant SRB must have expertise in trying to evolving framework as desired by METI in respect of section 69A of the IT Act, as well as verifying the fact that the games that they are registering are complying with the same and that the framework should be evolving. And with respect to considering application of any SRB, METI has the right to consult any appropriate government or agencies that it needs to prior to accepting or registering a particular SRB with itself. Now, while granting, just one second. Yeah, while granting membership to online gaming intermediaries, METI will have the following criteria will be considered by SRBs, which is essentially that the intermediary should be adhering with the fact that it is performing all its due diligence and additional due diligence obligations. Further, the fact that the intermediary and all games offered by it are adhering with the criteria particularly mentioned for games, which is in Rule 4B5. And the last thing that SRBs will take care of or will consider while looking at granting memberships to online gaming intermediaries is the track record of the intermediary in offering online games responsibly while not being in violation of section 69A. Now, coming to the criteria for the games that need to be registered by the SRBs, the games should not be violative of section 69A of the IT Act, obviously. Then the game should also be offered by a member intermediary. It can't be that someone who's a non-member will be coming to the SRB and say, okay, boss, please register my game. That's not going to happen. And the game, lastly, should also be in conformity with applicable Indian laws and should not be violating laws particularly relating to gambling or betting, or should also not be targeting individuals who are not legal age of contract, basically. Okay. And yeah. Now, with respect to the framework that these SRBs are required to evolve, the following criteria or aspects should be are requisites, basically, that the framework must contain, amongst other things. So these are aspects with regard to safeguarding users against harm, including self-harm. This is where the word potential harm comes in, which is from the notice for that went ahead with this proposed amendment. And the policy, the framework of the SRB should also safeguard children and should also have necessary safeguards against addiction to gaming as well as financial losses, which is already existing in terms of current gaming operators.
Nachiket, apologies, you will have to hurry a bit.
Yeah, I'm just done. I am done with I should be done the next 2 minutes. Yeah. And with regard to financial fraud, then we have, METI should, the SRB should also provide METI with a list of all the games that they have registered, along with their reasons for registering the same. And furthermore, this is the last slide. So METI should, if METI is of the view that a particular SRB is not complying with the IT rules, then METI can write to them in writing and direct them to be compliant. Or if it feels, it can revoke the registration of the SRB. However, revoking registration of the SRB might put the gaming intermediaries as well as users at risk in terms of their accounts and gaming intermediaries in terms of their business. Therefore, METI also has the right to provide specific directions as it may deem necessary. Now, lastly, Rule 6A has been proposed to be inserted, whereby I initially said that the gaming rules, the proposed rules look to put games of skill and games wherein users are paying within the scope of the IT rules. However, 6A gives MHA the choice that if it is of the view that a particular game, regardless of the fact that a deposit is required or not, is required to be brought under the scope of the IT rules, then MHA can notify the same, and it can also notify the time period within which the intermediary providing such a game has to comply with these IT rules. So that's it from my end, and sorry for stepping.
Thank you, Nachiket, for the detailed presentation. So if there are any queries, we will take it later. But now I'll pass it on to Rahul. Rahul, we have people from law enforcement and people from the security background. Would you like to have a discussion with them on this?
Yes, Amrita, thank you. Thank you, Nachiket, and thank you, everyone, Salone, Rachna, for detailed presentation covering various aspects of the landscape we are trying to cover. We know what the draft now says, what are the various requirements. So now we moved on to the stakeholder discussions, wherein we invite experts from various fields to present their views in respect to online gaming and laws. So let me start with Dr. Triveni Singh, who is with the UP Police. He's SP with the Special Task Force, and he has to leave. So let me first invite him to, sir, please share your views with respect to the challenges that you see, and also the when there is a requirement for a cybercrime investigation, what are the requirements that you see that you need from the help that you need from gaming companies? What do you see are the major barriers and overall general trends? So please.
Yeah, thank you, Rahul. So first, let me share my concern, what I have seen during lots of investigation. One time I was dealing with a case in which a boy, he was just 11 years old, and he spent 16 lakh rupees from his father's debit card, and and he didn't know it because he was using it late night after midnight, and he used to delete the SMS delivered on his mobile phone, So, and he had to marry his daughter. So when he went to the bank, he found that his account is nil. You see, this is the repercussion, because addiction, a kind of severe addiction is among the students. If you are forbidding them from playing this kind of online game, then what is the result? Its withdrawal symptoms are there. They are going into anxiety and depression and psychological disorder, lots of I have seen so many cases. Even a girl committed suicide when she was told by her mother not to play the game. So they are heavily addicted on the game. And I have seen that if I am talking about the gaming platform, I see that in the name of gaming platform, majority of them are into betting and gambling, So there is very thin line between ethical and unethical. Ethical is gaming and unethical is, betting and gambling. Betting and gambling in the name of, chance and skill. So for the sake of saying, they say that he's playing game with his skill. The fact is that it's just chance based and just, it's kind of a lottery. It's only so they will have to look into. As far as this draft is concerned, there is provision for 69A. I think it will be a tough task for the gaming company to comply with, but they will have to comply. The window time 24 hours has been given. That is right, I think, because in some of the cases, we need immediate information from intermediary. Because being a gaming company, you will be treated as intermediary, and the intermediary guidelines and digital code conduct will be equally applicable on you. So as far as affordability of infrastructure to allow the law enforcement agency and police to intercept the call, to get the data in real time for appointment of grievance officer and chief compliance officer, it will be definitely a difficult task for them. But my concern is there should be clear-cut division between gaming, betting, and gambling. So it should be clearly drafted. What will be the skill-based gaming and what will be chance-based gaming? There should be exact, it should be, explained in detail. Number one. Number two, when we are talking about KYC, then KYC should be complete. Without complete KYC, along with debit card, debit card and credit card details, because somebody may use the credential of some other to purchase some cloths or some special weapons for purchasing, this contest just to win the contest, just to prove, there are lots of rewards and competition held everywhere, and they are spending lots of money. So there should be, number one, strict KYC norm. Number two, if banking credential or payment credentials are there, then whose credential are these? It's related with their parents, brothers, or the gamer himself. He is providing his own KYC and debit card detail also. There should be some AI and ML based algorithm on the gaming company part to detect such kind of fraud. Otherwise, there will be lots of crime. There will be lots of psychosomatic disorder among the game addicts. So these are my concerns. Okay, thank you.
So thank you so much for sharing your views. So just to summarize, you talked about the need for skill versus chance clarity. It's going to be very difficult now, as the game, what essentially a game is, and how do you build and quantify those aspects of skill versus chance gets very difficult. But yeah, that's a good ask. And then second, on the KYC norms, that you said that every method should include a fully vetted KYC ecosystem that allows only the vetted players to play, and then also the vetting of financial information, whether it is a gamer who is putting his own money or using money from other sources. Correct? Yes, sir. So we have noted down your concerns. Let me then.
There were some points here in the chat for Mr. Singh, and I think the question comes from the gaming companies. Is established gaming companies may have a better system. It is just that you have fly-by-night companies also who may not have a process, because normally they have a registration process. So there were a few comments which were there that ideally there is a difference between illegal and unethical. The debate around regulation has to be in legality and not on ethics. And there was also a comment that there is a necessity to draw distinction between addiction and lack of education to empower users of new technology. I think because many of them actually don't know how to use. It needs digital skills. And parents giving their cards to children without any question is also a concern, apart from the kids using it. So what access parents gave the children is also a concern. There was a query, Rahul. Do you want to take it, or perhaps it will be taken later in the chat?
Yes, so I'll leave it to Dr. Triveni Singh if he wants to answer them. So about the aspects that you just mentioned about the illegal and what is unethical. Plus, Lokesh has asked a specific question about what are the video games like Candy Crush or Temple Run, etc.
Okay, so if we talk about the industry as a whole, gaming industry as a whole, and they are forming their own self-regulatory organization, then it's advice from me that they should have their own team to monitor some unethical players. They are coming into the market, the fly-by-night operators. So there should be, instant alert and some liaising with the law enforcement agency to act against them. Otherwise, the entire gaming industry will be defamed. As far as credential of their parents and without their consent is known, they should try to install some kind of mechanism to get explicit consent in case of, if that is being used by their children, their credit card details, you can try, So this is from my end.
All right. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for your views and intervention. Okay. Now let me invite Shailendra, sir, to share his views, his experience of dealing with the issue while he was at MHA and now as outside. How does he look at it? What are the issues and challenges? How should the companies view these roles, and what is the way forward, sir?
थैंक यू राहुल। मैं लगभग 9 साल MHA में रहा। डिजिटल स्पेस से रिलेटेड जो इश्यूज हैं, पब्लिक कंसर्न है, सिक्योरिटी कंसर्न है, नेशनल सिक्योरिटी कंसर्न है, तो एक अंडरस्टैंडिंग अभी खास करके जब भी त्रिवेणी सर के साथ भी, माहेश्वर जी के साथ भी, everybody in the government was concerned about the safe and secure internet, because जब तक safe and secure internet नहीं होगा तो services will not be useful. जो unlawful, criminal elements हैं, they will explore, they will spoil the internet. तो अब उसके लिए जरूरी है कि जो भी इंटरनेट प्लेटफॉर्म में काम करते हैं, दे शुड अडॉप्ट द बेस्ट प्रैक्टिसेस हाउ टू मेक इंटरनेट सेफ एंड सिक्योर. सो इंटरमीडिएट गाइडलाइन जो 2018 में हमने ड्राफ्ट करी थी, फिर 21 में निकली थी, उसका यही था कि बिकॉज सोशल मीडिया में बहुत चीजें अच्छी थी, दे आर नॉट कंप्लाइंग मैनी थिंग्स, कि आप चीजें यूज लोगों का बढ़ रहा था, इनोसेंट पीपल्स आर यूजिंग सोशल मीडिया, बट उनके साथ उनके हार्म्स हो रहे थे, उनके साथ क्राइम्स हो रहे थे, बट they were not taking proper action. Now the compliance level has been increased so far. अब काफी अच्छा कुछ हो गया. तो अब गेमिंग में जब भी, क्योंकि बिकॉज इनिशियल स्टेज से अब मैं इस गेमिंग रेगुलेशंस के उसमें इन्वॉल्व था, तो बेसिक जो कंसर्न होता है कंट्री का, मुझे दिखा कि सरकार का इंडस्ट्री, क्योंकि सबको पता है कि इंडस्ट्री एक बहुत बड़ी इंडस्ट्री है और इंडिया का बड़ा फ्यूचर इसमें है, बिकॉज वी हैव द लार्ज नंबर ऑफ इंटरनेट यूजर्स, वी हैव स्किल हेयर, डेवलप डिफरेंट टाइप ऑफ गेम्स, मार्केट हमारे पास बहुत बड़ा है, बाहर के लोग यहाँ पर आके इंडस्ट्री का अपना सेटल कर रहे हैं, तो क्यों ना हमें इसको ग्रो किया जाए. आपने इसलिए नतीजा देखा होगा 6 महीने 7 महीने में आपको रेगुलेशन आ गया है, और रेगुलेशन इस तरह से इतना प्रोग्रेसिव है कि आप चाहते तो सरकार हर इस इवेंट पे एक इंस्ट्रक्शन निकाल सकती थी कि आप हमसे लाइसेंस लेंगे और देन यू कैन ऑपरेट योर गेम, बट दे हैव लेफ्ट टू डू एसआरओ, सेल्फ रेगुलेटरी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, जो बॉडी है इंडस्ट्री को खुद ही दिया हुआ है. अगर कोई पूछे कि क्या अलाउ है क्या नहीं अलाउ है, अब हर चीज अलाउ है अगर इससे कोई नेशनल सिक्योरिटी को, पब्लिक सेफ्टी को, या ऐसी चीजों को, हमारे जो हिस्टोरिकल है या हमारा जो कल्चरल बैकग्राउंड है, इसमें कोई डैमेज नहीं होता है. अब ये जिम्मेदारी दे दी गई है आपके इंडस्ट्री को, हमको सबको, बिकॉज मैं भी इंडस्ट्री के साथ ही जुड़ा हुआ बहुत जगह पे, तो हमारी जिम्मेदारी है कि हाउ टू मेक क्रिएट द ट्रस्ट बिटवीन विद द गवर्नमेंट, ट्रस्ट विद द पब्लिक, पेरेंट्स, ट्रस्ट विद द स्कूल्स, एकेडमिक जो लॉबी है, ट्रस्ट बिटवीन द गेमर्स एंड गेम प्रोवाइडर्स, बिकॉज कि कितने भी केसेस आते हैं कि पेरेंट्स परेशान हैं, जो गेमर है, जो सब्सक्राइबर है, दे आर आल्सो नॉट गेटिंग द प्रॉपर ट्रीटमेंट, उन्हें पता नहीं कि मेरा पैसा गया कहाँ गया, कैसे गया, वेदर दे आर प्लेइंग फेयर गेम और नॉट गेम. ठीक है, तो ये जो ट्रस्ट डेवलप करना है सभी के बीच में, ये तो तभी तो इंडस्ट्री ग्रो कर पाएगी. जब से क्वेश्चन आ रहा है कि क्या अलाउ है क्या नहीं अलाउ है, ये मतलब अब जैसे अब होता है, क्योंकि ऐप काफी कुछ ब्लॉक हुए थे, उसके पीछे क्या बैकग्राउंड था, उसके पीछे कई पबजी वगैरह का बैकग्राउंड क्या था, बिकॉज देवर प्रोड्यूसिंग द वायलेंट कैरेक्टर विद द किड्स, बच्चे खेल रहे थे. अब आप इतने ज्यादा अगर कोई भी होगा तो नेचुरली एक सिस्टम होगा, अपना एक इनिशिएटिव लेगा, कुछ एक्शन लेगा. अगर वही चीज जैसे लोकेश जी पूछ रहे थे इसका क्या होगा, तो अगर वही इंडस्ट्री है, ई स्पोर्ट्स है या कोई भी बॉडी है, अगर हम खुद ही कंप्लाई करें या खुद ही अपने आप को जिम्मेदारी से महसूस करके चीजों को अडॉप्ट करें, फ्रेमवर्क, अभी एसआरओ को दिया गया कि फ्रेमवर्क बनाओ, उन्होंने, सरकार ने कहीं डिफाइन नहीं किया है कि गेम ऑफ चांस अलाउ है कि गेम ऑफ स्किल अलाउ है. आपके ऊपर है कि आप क्या देना चाहते हैं कंट्री को, कंट्री की पब्लिक को, और इसके साथ ही सरकार को तो जिम्मेदारी से उसको चाहता है कि इससे रेवेन्यू जनरेशन होगा, एम्प्लॉयमेंट जनरेशन होगा, लेकिन इसके लिए सबके बीच में एक कॉन्फिडेंस और बनना पड़ेगा. तो अब इस रूल में बेसिकली मैंने देखा कि इसको आईटी रूल में इंक्लूड किया गया है, जो कि एग्जिस्टिंग पहले से बना हुआ था, क्योंकि एज ए इंटरमीडिएटरी इसको इंक्लूड किया गया है. ठीक है, अभी दे आर नॉट टॉकिंग अबाउट एज ए इंडस्ट्री ओनली, दे आर टॉकिंग अबाउट द वेयर एट प्लेटफॉर्म, क्योंकि पहले भी हमने क्या, जब हम मिनिस्ट्री में तो हमने ये था कि दे आर इंटरमीडिएटरी. अब एज पर इंटरमीडिएट गाइडलाइन दे हैव टू अडॉप्ट बेस्ट प्रैक्टिसेस, सिक्योरिटी प्रैक्टिसेस, और जो भी, क्योंकि अभी कल को आज गेमिंग आया, कल को कुछ और आएगा, टेक्नोलॉजी इतनी तेज बढ़ रही है कि इंटरनेट प्लेटफॉर्म बहुत सी चीजें आएंगी, आप कितने को लोगों को रूल अलग से बनाता रहेगा. अब वही है कि जो इंडस्ट्री, जो भी प्रोडक्ट आएगा, जो भी प्रोडक्ट है, कुछ भी प्रोडक्ट आएगा, डेटिंग ऐप आ रहे हैं, मैट्रिमोनियल ऐप आ रहे हैं, किसी ने सबके लिए लाभ थोड़ी बन सकता है. लेकिन ये है कि जो भी ला रहा है उसकी जिम्मेदारी है कि तुम्हारे प्लेटफॉर्म का मिसयूज नहीं होना चाहिए। जैसे कि अब डाला है कि 69A को कंप्लायंट होना चाहिए। व्हाट इज 69A? एनीथिंग शुड नॉट बी डेट्रीमेंटल टू नेशनल सिक्योरिटी। सिंपल है। अब एक अंडरस्टैंडिंग आपको जो भी प्लेटफॉर्म पे प्रोड्यूस करेगा लाएगा, उसके अंदर एक अंडरस्टैंडिंग होती है कि इससे हमारे नेशनल सिक्योरिटी को क्या फर्क पड़ेगा, या पब्लिक सेफ्टी को क्या फर्क पड़ेगा, या इससे हमारे जो है कम्युनल हार्मनी कुछ भी चीजें हैं उससे क्या फर्क पड़ेगा। ये आपके अंदर एक जजमेंटल जो अपना बनना पड़ेगा, अपने आप लाना पड़ेगा। तो आप देखिएगा कि आप कुछ भी लाएंगे, मुझे नहीं लगता है कि कल को पता लगे गेम ऑफ चांस में, तो गेम ऑफ चांस भी आ सकता है, बशर्ते उससे एडिक्शन न हो, उससे आप चिल्ड्रन का हार्म्स न हो, उससे कोई चीजें न गड़बड़ हो। तो हमारे अंदर जो रूल में इतने चीजें उन्होंने डाल रखी है, सब गाइडलाइंस है बेसिकली, और कुछ गाइडलाइंस जो पहले भी आईटी रूल में है वो भी हमें फॉलो करनी पड़ेगी। लाइक अब सरकार का कंसर्न क्या होता है, कंटेंट। 3 चीजें हैं जो मैंने बताता हूँ सबको कि 3 कंसर्न होता है। एक तो कंटेंट होता है, आप क्या परोस रहे हैं। कंटेंट शुड बी द लॉफुल, शुड नॉट बी हार्मफुल, और उसके पीछे जो भी आप चीजें ला रहे हो देर ट्रांसपेरेंट होना चाहिए। इसीलिए उन्होंने डाला हुआ है कि आप केवाईसी अच्छी से सो दैट कि मनी लॉन्ड्रिंग केसेस ना हो, चीटिंग क्वेश्चन हो, क्राइम ना हो। अगर कल को कुछ हो जाए तो इन्वेस्टिगेशन के लिए चीजें आपको अवेलेबल हो, और प्लेयर्स के लिए भी ट्रांसपेरेंट फाइनेंशियल ट्रांजेक्शन होना चाहिए, सब कुछ होना चाहिए। आपका जो प्रोडक्ट है, क्योंकि अभी आ गया डिस्प्यूट भी आ गया वेदर गेमिंग प्लेटफॉर्म आर द पब्लिशर आर इंटरमीडियरी। क्योंकि इंटरमीडिएट में क्या होता है कि जनरली है कि इंटरमीडिएट इज द प्रोवाइडिंग द प्लेटफॉर्म, तब उनके कंटेंट होते बाहर के होते हैं, दे आर नॉट लाइबल। 79 में जो एग्जाम्पशन मिला हुआ है इसके लिए हुआ है, बट दे आर प्रोड्यूसिंग, जैसे क्यूरेटेड कंटेंट का है नेटफ्लिक्स वगैरह, दे आर मेकिंग देयर ओन कंटेंट, उनको पब्लिशर डील किया गया। ये कन्फ्लिक्ट अभी आएगा, लेकिन शुरुआत है अभी रेगुलेशन की, हो सकता है क्लियरिटी आएगी क्योंकि एबीजीसी में आएगा। अभी तो एक बेसिकली आरएमजी को कवर करता है, बट दे आर नॉट कवरिंग जो मेन फोकस है एवीजीसी का, आपके वीडियो गेम्स का है, जहां पे लोग खेलेंगे, वहां पे कंटेंट आएगा, वहां पे कैरेक्टर्स आएंगे, वहां पे कैसी चीजें हैं, स्टोरी जो आएगी, जहां पे आपके मॉनिटर करने की जरूरत पड़ेगी, वहां पब्लिशर की तरह होगा। ये फिर आपके ग्रो है, अभी एक खत्म नहीं हुआ है, ये जैसे जैसे अडॉप्ट करते जाएंगे, अगर इंडस्ट्री अपने साथ उसको ट्रक्स को डेवलप करती जाएगी, तो सरकार के मेरे ख्याल से जो भी सपोर्टर भी रहेगा, साथ में इंडस्ट्री ग्रो भी करेगी। दूसरा चीज है कि हाँ, इनकेस जब प्लेटफॉर्म पे दूसरा कंसर्न होता है गवर्नमेंट का रेगुलेशन का, जो उसमें लाने के पीछे ग्राउंड रहा है, इन्वेस्टिगेशन ऑफ एनी साइबर क्राइम, कुछ भी हो जाएगा तो इन्वेस्टिगेशन के लिए। तो इसलिए उन्होंने प्रोविजन रखा हुआ है चीफ कंप्लायंस ऑफिसर, और जो कि रिस्पॉन्सिबल होगा सब चीज के लिए, वो भी इसके लिए होगा। 69 के अगेंस्ट कोई चीजें तो नहीं जा रही हैं, ऐसी कोई कंटेंट तो नहीं जा रहा है। और उसमें एक है कि दे हैव टू प्रोवाइड द कम्युनिकेशन लिंक ऑफ जो चैट बॉक्स का है, इसके भी होगा, तो दे हैव टू प्रोवाइड द लॉग। तो अब हमारे इंडस्ट्री को अपना आर्किटेक्चर ऐसा क्रिएट करना पड़ेगा कि जो भी चीजें आपके जैसे होता है कई वजह कि आपका एडिक्शन के अगेंस्ट में, मान लीजिए किसी गेमिंग प्लेटफॉर्म के ऊपर कोई एलिगेशन आ गया, अगर उन्होंने अपना कोई अलर्ट इशू किया है, जैसे कि एक बच्चा कोई भी है, कोई आदमी खेल रहा है, ज्यादा पैसे का, अगर आप यू आर इशूइंग द अलर्ट, तो आप कह सकते हो ना कि हाँ मैंने तो इसको अलर्ट किया हुआ है, मेरा काम तो इसको अलर्ट करना है, बाकी लॉग आउट वो करेगा, हम फोर्स तो नहीं करेंगे क्योंकि हमारा ये तो बिजनेस मॉडल। कुछ ऐसी चीजें अडॉप्ट करनी पड़ेगी इंडस्ट्री को, जिससे कि चीजों को हार्म को कम किया जाए और अपने आप को लॉजिकली अपने आप को बता भी सके कि वी आर ऑल्सो वेरी कंसर्न अबाउट द पब्लिक सेफ्टी। तीसरा है जो ग्रेवेंस रिड्रेसल का है, तो ग्रेवेंस रिड्रेसल में तो ग्रेवेंस ऑफिसर है। अभी सरकार ने ग्रेवेंस अपेलेट बॉडी भी बनाने का है, जो कि उसी आईटी रूल में आता है। तो होपफुली जहां तक सरकार ने एक इंस्ट्रक्शन, एक गाइडलाइन दिया है, लेकिन इसमें जिम्मेदारी एसआरओ की ज्यादा है, बिकॉज एसआरओ ऑन बिहाफ ऑफ गवर्नमेंट काम करेगा इसको मॉनिटर करने का। दे शुड हैव द कैपेसिटी टू मॉनिटर। खाली यही नहीं कि जो रजिस्टर्ड मॉनिटर है, अगर वो एसआरओ अनरजिस्टर्ड जो गेमिंग एप्लीकेशंस हैं या प्लेटफॉर्म्स हैं, जैसे आप ऑफशोर गैम्बलिंग की बात करते हैं, तो आपके पास, हमारे पास, जो एसआरओ के पास ऐसा अपनी होनी चाहिए, कैपेसिटी होनी चाहिए। दे शुड आइडेंटिफाई टू सपोर्ट द गवर्नमेंट के साथ मिलके काम करना होगा कि देखिए हमने आइडेंटिफाई किया हुआ है और ये चीजें हैं, ये नॉट रजिस्टर्ड, दे शुड बी ब्लॉक। क्योंकि 69 में मैंने जब बात मैसरू जी से भी हो रही थी कि आपने 69 में कर दिया, लेकिन विच आर नॉट फॉलोइंग दिस रूल्स, उसमें तो ब्लॉकिंग के लिए, क्योंकि जब तक कोई नोटिस नहीं देगा, 69A में प्रोविजन है कि इफ एनी एजेंसी फाउंड दैट any material is unlawful, not unlawful against the national security, then they request for that. If they not notice, तो फिर क्या होगा? तो ऐसे में SRO को अपना एक रोल अदा करना होगा कि जो अपने साइबर स्पेस में ऐसे जो हार्मफुल जो अब एप्स होंगे या प्लेटफॉर्म्स होंगे और आइडेंटिफाई करने पड़ेगा, खुद के भी जो मेंबर्स होंगे उनको करना भी पड़ेगा। तो मेरे कहने का पूरा मतलब ये था कि बाय दिस वे वी कैन क्रिएट ए एटमॉस्फेयर, एक ट्रस्टेड एटमॉस्फेयर, जिसमें कभी कोई किसी को न लगेगा कि हाँ ये गलत कर रहे हैं, गलत कर रहे हैं। तभी होगा कि हाँ ये एंटरटेनमेंट भी है, स्किल भी दे रहे हैं और रेवेन्यू भी जनरेट हो रहा है, एम्प्लॉयमेंट भी जनरेट हो रहा है, लोगों को कई सी चीजें पॉजिटिव चीजें हैं, लोगों के अंदर जो है एक क्या बोलते हैं कि कई गेम जो है आपके अंदर की जो कैपेबिलिटी भी डेवलप करती है, रिफ्लेक्शन डेवलप करती है। अब इस तरह से जब आपका डेवलप हो जाएगा तो मुझे लगता है कि इंडस्ट्री ग्रोथ की मतलब 2 पॉइंट है जो मैं सजेस्ट करना चाहूंगा, मतलब कि थोड़ा हमें पुश करना चाहिए। जैसे अब कन्फ्लिक्टिंग सिचुएशन होगा कि हम मान लीजिए इंडस्ट्री ने SRO ने डिक्लेयर कर दिया किसी गेम को एज ए अलाउड गेम, ठीक है, नॉट स्किल नॉट एनीथिंग, अलाउ कर दिया एज पर द रूल, हाउ दे हैव इन्फॉर्म द मीटी सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट द नोडल मिनिस्ट्री दैट वी हैव अलाउड और दे हैव नॉट ऑब्जेक्टेड एनीथिंग, ठीक है, बिकॉज द बोर्ड ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स में एक सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट अपॉइंटेड मेंबर भी है, ठीक है। इन केस कल को कोई कन्फ्लिक्टिंग सिचुएशन होता, मान लीजिए वहां पर तमिलनाडु जैसे स्टेट्स में कहीं भी ऐसी होता है, तो देयर मस्ट बी ए बॉडी, अपेलेट बॉडी जैसे है, जैसे कोई सी बॉडी है गवर्नमेंट के पास होनी चाहिए, जो कि या ऐसा हमारे पास मतलब हमें मतलब कोर्ट में न जाके उस बॉडी के पास जाए जहां वो अपने एक्सपर्टाइज से अपने दिखाए कि वेदर दे आर गैम्बलिंग और नॉट, बिकॉज ऑनलाइन गैम्बलिंग का कहीं डिफिनेशन अभी पर नहीं है, गैम्बलिंग है लेकिन ऑनलाइन गैम्बलिंग नहीं है, तो ये रहेगा, तो ये कहीं ना कहीं एक, लेकिन ये एक्सरसाइज करते रहनी पड़ेगी इंडस्ट्री को भी और SRO को खास करके चीजों को लाना पड़ेगा। एक तो ये है कि ऐसी कोई बॉडी हो, न्यूट्रल बॉडी, थर्ड पर्सन, क्योंकि एक एलिगेशन लोग आएगा कि मीडिया में मैं देख रहा था कि सम पीपल आर सेइंग दैट कि दे आर द सेम SRO फ्रॉम द फंडेड बाय द सेम मेंबर्स, ठीक है। तो ऐसे में कोई थर्ड पार्टी क्रिएट हो, कल को ट्राई की तरह कोई रेगुलेटरी बॉडी क्रिएट हो, तो हमारी ये कोशिश होनी चाहिए कि जिसके ऊपर फेयरनेस डिसीजन लेने का कोई मतलब हो कि हाँ ले सके और टू प्रोटेक्ट द इंडस्ट्री, और क्योंकि जो फेयर बिजनेस करना चाहते हैं उनको तो करना चाहिए। एक तो ये था कि हमें ऐसा करना चाहिए। दूसरा एक और था, एक बार बहुत पहले बात उठी हुई थी दूसरे सेंस में कि इन केस इस इशू पे कि वेदर इट इज गैम्बलिंग और इट इज नॉट गैम्बलिंग, अगर हमने सर्टिफिकेट रजिस्टर्ड हो गया एज ए अलाउड ऑनलाइन गेमिंग और किसी पुलिस में करता है कि दिस इज गैम्बलिंग और FIR लॉन्च कर देता है, देयर मस्ट बी सम प्रोटेक्शन फॉर द इंडस्ट्री, बिकॉज ये कोई क्राइम नहीं हुआ है, ये इंटरप्रिटेशन का फर्क है। तो हमें सरकार को कहीं अप्रोच करना चाहिए कि इन केस ऑफ सच सिचुएशन विद नो एक्शन शुड बी टेकन विदाउट कंकरेंस ऑफ द SRO या जो भी बॉडी है, नोडल मिनिस्ट्री, बिकॉज नोडल मिनिस्ट्री शुड हैव द रिस्पांसिबिलिटी इन सच केसेस कि जहां पर कोई ऐसी क्रिमिनल, अदरवाइज आपका CCO भाग जाएगा उठा के उसको कोई क्योंकि चीफ कंप्लायंस अफसर उसके जिम्मेदार बैठा देंगे। तो एक 2-3 चीजें हैं जो कि किया जा सकता है, और बाकी मुझे लगता है कि आ गया नए समय में एक बिग इंडस्ट्री और जो हमारे सरकार का विजन है तो फुलफिल करेंगे। थैंक यू।
No, sir, thank you. Sir, before you go and I ask other speakers to join in, so can you briefly discuss about the government thinking on whether a separate law was required for online gaming as a space to start with, or a separate regulator to begin with, or they thought that the intermediary rules are the best way?
Yeah. This is the interim provision. As per my understanding, this is the interim provision because government in the consideration of bringing a separate law. यही क्वेश्चन था ना कि दिस इज इंटरिम मेजर, ये इंटरिम मेजर है एक, क्योंकि आपने सुना होगा कि एक इंटरिम मेजर है, एक तो था परमानेंट मेजर के लिए, क्योंकि AVGC का प्रोडक्ट है पूरा कि गेमिंग प्लेटफॉर्म एक बहुत बड़ा प्लेटफॉर्म बनेगा, तो उसके लिए एक अलग लॉ का है, और मुझे लगता है कि काम शुरू हो जाएगा जल्दी।
Okay, so like the industry can look forward to a separate law dedicated to either gaming or larger AVGC sector in coming times.
This is opportunity for industry to create the
draft of the
supportive
laws.
environment.
Okay.
अगर आप फॉलो करोगे, कंप्लाई करोगे, तो हो सकता है कि जो भी लॉ बनेगा वेरी मतलब हमारे पास वो सपोर्टिव लॉ.
Okay, all right.
Right. Thank you, sir. Thank you for sharing reviews. We heard the law enforcement, but now we would like to hear, the thrust is on consumers, users, etc. So we have Shivani Jha, who represents the Esports Players Welfare Association. Shivani, if you're there, would you like to share your views on what exactly is it that users are actually looking at? What is it they need online? Shivani, if you're there, can you speak up? Okay, Rahul, just in case Shivani is not there, would you like to, let's hear from the industry what they feel. Would you take the industry discussion ahead?
All right, so let me bring in Saumya. Saumya is here, right? Saumya is with us.
Yes.
Yes, Saumya. Hi, thank you for joining us. Please, you have been hearing the discussions. So please share your views as a company. What do you think? How do you see this landscape? What do you think about the regulations in the way they are? What should be done to make them better? How do we address harm? Yes, sir. Go ahead.
So thank you, first of all, for kind of creating this opportunity, and happy Gowree to everybody who is currently present on this forum. I think at a 10,000 feet level, of course, it's a positive move, which at least gives us a fundamental recognition to the industry. Clearly, calls out again the distinction which already exists between online game of skill and an online game of chance. This kind of a validation coming from a government in the proposed draft is very, very timely, because it also feeds into an ongoing conversation by the group of ministers on GST. And we are hoping that it positively feeds there. Over the past 18 months, as the ecosystem had really evolved, and a lot of players, or a lot of people moved, in India to smartphone and connected to internet for the first time, and we became the largest consumer base on the internet globally. We also saw, of course, growth of offshore betting and gambling products, which were served in India, which, of course, by the law of the land was not legal. However, given that it was a state matter, the government had little, powers which were coming at the center level to restrict such products. Even there was 100% intent. We saw how Consumer Affairs from time and again, sent out notifications which clearly clarified the intent of the government that it should not be made available. There shouldn't be any advertisements. People should be protected. And hence, we see this draft, which came after much consultation with the industry, a lot of work which went from the interministerial task force for months altogether, and is, well positioned rather to address some of the concerns that the government was looking to address. However, before I get into the concerns which we as a company could see, or the ecosystem with companies like ourselves could see, I wanted to 10,000 feet level lay how the gaming ecosystem really looks like today in India. So of course, you have the gaming ecosystem, and specifically games which are played for what we commonly call real money. Is nothing new in this country. In fact, it's at least 10 to 15 years old, where you had companies which innovated in the ecosystem and were leaders on the online rummy space, such as Rummy Circle, which obviously rummy as a format attracted a lot more players across last 15 years. But that's one of the oldest player in the ecosystem. Again, you had many companies which started around the year 2008, 9, 10. In fantasy, which is, Dream 11 is a flag bearer, one of the largest fantasy companies, let alone in India, but globally. And of course, there were many poker companies also that existed. And all these companies age at least 10 to 15 years old, and fairly large, stable monetization, great values that they have generated. And hence, with states often having a knee-jerk reaction and blocking, there was a lot at risk with these large players. However, there's a new crop, if I may say, of companies that started, that started the company in itself, maybe in the span of last 3 or 4 or 5 years max, right? And this new crop is actually looking at the sector, in a way that the world has never looked at. So, they're products which never existed before and is specifically made for a country like India. So, for example, if I have to talk about Winzo is something like a Netflix of gaming, a platform which actually does not has its own game, but gets third-party game developers to publish its game on the platform across various proprietary formats, which are made in-house, and metas which are made in-house, a unique micro monetization model, which is very unique to Winzo, which can be seen as a play to win or a real money gaming format for games such as 8-ball pool, chess, carom, Candy Crush. And these are the games which are played by Bharat, right? Which is the mobile first audience, and an audience which has never been solved for, an audience which has for decades been excluded from consumer tech product space. We were the first company that actually offered the product in 12+ languages. We focused very, very thoroughly on Bharat, and the average ticket size actually on our platform, and when I say ticket size, the amount spent on a platform per month is somewhere around 300 to 400 rupees, which basically makes it one of the cheapest entertainment format that a user can use on a social, vernacular, culturally relevant form. And at the same time, large studios that could not sustain in India because the monetization model didn't work, now has an alternative distribution outside Google, Facebook, and the big tech giants in a way of Winzo, which has 100 million plus registered users today. And not only that, but also they have an alternative monetization model. And there are many, many companies which are doing something very similar today, building a platform, a cross-site network effect, content, PUBG-like game, which India really deserves to have because it's the largest gaming market globally. And monetization, let's accept it, is one of the biggest problem because of which we never had a studio as a starting point, right? But just started, there was a lot of heat that the ecosystem saw because of a lot of consumers came onto the platform. And in the current draft, I do feel that there are certain aspects that could be addressed, which will actually help these companies, which I'm the latter set, innovating in the sector, and would require a certain amount of bandwidth to create a IP which can help us win over the world, right? Like almost like a made in India for the world product, which rules and we can see in like public markets in years to come, right?
Yeah.
And some of those aspects are, so, let's talk about maybe as a fundamental point, my access to market, right? Let's imagine that I'm a game developer and I'm sitting here with an idea, looking to develop a product. But before I can push out that product in the market, I have to have, a lawyer who can fight with me in an SRO, whether it is a game of skill or chance. I don't even know whether my product is going to work. It's in terms of...
It's more like a sandbox, right? So it's an industry sandbox.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Sorry, just to come in for the speakers, we have 5 to 7 minutes, so just keep that in mind.
Yeah. Yes, Saumya. So please, if you have any closing comments, then please share.
Sure. So maybe the SRO construct and pre-listing of or pre-whitelisting of the content is something which can be relooked at because it puts the patent or the IP at risk because there's no patent. Sorry, it puts the IP at risk because there's no way that you can patent the product in this gaming ecosystem. In terms of KYC, I think for smaller players, the RBI equivalent KYC could be a little onerous and expensive proposition. The compliance officers and all those can be threshold linked because, again, for starting companies, it can be something which can be an expensive proposition. I think those are some of the points which could be looked at and could be linked to a threshold rather than like a blanket. And definitely a pre-listing mechanism or pre-whitelisting mechanism through a way of an SRO, which is envisaged as a private body, could be a little problematic given that they are, competing companies coming together to form this SRO. So those are again.
Yes.
Those are my comments.
Oh, so thank you, Saumya. Very pretty valid and relevant. And I think we have heard these concerns similarly across stakeholder groups. Now, let me move over to the legal experts. Let me invite Rachna. Hi, Rachna. Are you here with us? Hi.
Hi. Hi there.
Yes.
Hi.
So let me ask you by, please provide us your view, your perspective on what exactly is gaming? How do you define gaming? How does a law define online gaming? And what are the challenges that you see in terms of, building this legal ecosystem the way the government is envisaging? So, yeah.
Sure. I'm going to just recast that a little bit, Rahul, in the interest of time and the fact that there are equally well-read colleagues of mine from the fraternity, and I'm sure they'll have a lot of points to take up as well. Amrita, I'll honor your 5-minute window as well. I think we should start by firstly just commending the speed and purpose with which the government has acted positively in this sense, right? I mean, we could all be naysayers or yay-sayers, but I think we need to appreciate the fact that they're looking at giving a certain degree of legitimacy for this industry, which could be a great contributor to the economy as a whole. Now, keeping that in mind, and I think Shailendra ji very well said that, let's not forget the fact that what we have before us is probably an interim solution to a very imminent problem. And the long-term solution probably lies in the Digital India Act. So keeping that in mind and weighing in on that one, I think your first question with respect to online gaming and the definition itself, I think let's look at what does it lack as on today in terms of the definition. And there could be so many interpretations to it. I think the reliance on the word deposit is fairly heavy. It's been defined in a manner to include references to cash or kind, which sort of creates a bit of an anomaly in the law. And whenever you look at the word gaming in the Indian context and institutes in pari materia, usually the references are vis-a-vis money or money's worth. Honestly, I think we all would agree that laws need to be nimble to sort of evolve and kind of include all kind of business models, right? But the way the definition is given today, I do believe that a lot of us believe that maybe certain kind of non-real money games could also get included. At the same time, I feel that a lot of the Web3 versions where you don't essentially have a deposit of any kind of a widget, like an NFT or something in their game ecosystem and the game journey, those kind of game formats might not really get included. So in terms of the law being nimble enough to sort of encompass the current gaming ecosystem, perhaps there are certain 2 or 3 areas that could be included or clarified, beginning with bringing in references to money or money's worth and things like that. Some of it could also perhaps be achieved by, sort of not just trying to evolve what the definition is, but perhaps also give certain guidance in the form of FAQs in terms of trying to say what is included, not included, so that the industry understands what was the intent. Speaking of an FAQ, I think, given just the number of things that this law sort of encompasses, including things like timelines, different thresholds to be met, one thing that the government can definitely look at equally is to provide a guidance by way of issuing FAQs. Some of the issues that I can think of that they can cover in that could be, things like guidance on, just a simple example, in terms of formation of the SRP. Everything is very subjective without any real criteria being set out. It talks about things like track record. Now, how does the industry really reconstitute itself, right? How does it satisfy what the government's truly looking at? I do believe a lot of this cannot be articulated in the law, but it certainly can, the guidance can be provided by, this kind of an FAQ probably be brought out. Especially on the track record, my suggestion would be reliance on just having track record in terms of existing SROs might not really tick the box. It does become a market entry barrier for more nuanced, specialized SRBs in the future. Therefore, reliance on track record of perhaps the board of directors might be a good way of looking at it, but needn't be articulated in the law. It could be something which could be in the guidance note. On the SRB, since we're there, I think one or two other things that did catch my attention. One was certainly the composition. Considering the fact that there is a degree of an adjudicatory function that this SRB does need to evolve, what I did find missing was a compulsory presence of somebody from the judiciary as an ex-judiciary or somebody who's lived that journey of sort of understanding the legal principles and evaluating them and applying them, in an adjudicatory function. I would believe that that should be one of the compulsory positions to fulfill for a composition to be very, very fruitful for the objectives being sought to be achieved. I think on the SRB itself, another thing that I found lacking would be that for any kind of a grievance that the company in itself may have from a decision from an SRB, there truly wasn't a mechanism whereby, they could approach maybe the government, or rather the only recourse was to probably go to court, which doesn't really resolve the larger issue that you have in terms of, just the quantum of games you would be looking at. So certainly kind of putting in an added level of a reach from the SRB issues to the government could be one of the solutions to be looked at and to be evaluated. I'll very quickly touch upon some of maybe the one or two other things that I think would be impactful for the industry and round it up with that. I think some of us have spoken about the need for KYC. I don't think that anyone disagrees that there needs to be a certain level of KYC to be there in the ecosystem. But sort of equating that at the same degree and level of what would be implemented for a financial regulated entity, including things like a video KYC and things like that, could be extremely onerous. Think about it this way. This gaming industry is predominantly a startup ecosystem, and you would create this to be a market entry barrier for a lot of the startups out there, especially. I'm not even talking about the mature startups who probably have, kind of reached a certain degree of scale. But those startups, especially who are still trying to, navigate their journey in terms of customer acquisition. I think every industry person on this panel would probably agree that having such stringent KYC at the time of the onset of a user journey, when you don't even know that you're going to convert that consumer to a real money gaming player, there may not even be any deposits at that juncture, that extremely onerous, interferes with customer experience, and is going to act as a very big market barrier for what you're looking at Sunrise sector as such. I think equally so, another thing that caught my attention was that while it is under the same intermediary guidelines, you don't have the same sort of a differentiation made between a significant OGI and an OGI as a whole. These different categories of provisions that have been created, like a chief compliance officer, etc., which is for a significant social media intermediary in terms of a parallel. There's no such distinction being made. Now imagine a bootstrapped startup having to comply with something at the onset and the kind of a commercial economic impact it could have. The question is, what is the mischief that you're trying to address? Is it really a commensurate measure? Or should you revisit this to see that there's some sort of a distinction to be made? I'm going to pause here because I'm fairly conscious of the time that Amrita has given, and I'm equally confident that my other legal colleagues on the panel are going to take up a lot of the other points. Thank you, Rahul, for giving me this opportunity of expressing my views.
So thank you, Ranjana. And as you mentioned about, Maitri also commented, we also need to look at a more graded approach for compliance for companies based on their size, the number of users, and they cannot be rules and regulations which become an entry barrier for the startups, for customer acquisition, for user acquisition to bring them on board. And with that, let me move on to the other legal experts. Let me bring in Abhishek next. So Abhishek, you have heard the discussion so far. You have heard the legal points and the points being raised by the users in the chat, and also otherwise the questions that were sent. So please share your views with respect to how do you see these rules panning out? And specifically one question we would like to address, which Ranjana briefly touched on, is the concept of Web 3.0. How does it impact the use of virtual assets, cryptos, the NFT ecosystem with the different worlds merging in the gaming ecosystem. So yeah, over to you, Abhishek.
Thanks, Rahul, and thanks, Amrita, for inviting me for this panel discussion. I know that a lot of thoughts and ideas have been exchanged on this panel, and it gives a lot of food for thought, perhaps to be presented to the policymakers to maybe have a relook at the proposed rules. I'd like to start with the positives, certainly. Why has this come about? So I think it's been a long-standing need of the industry to have a set of cogent, identifiable, implementable, and standard set of regulations that people can rely upon from a point of view of saying that, yes, there is an inherent risk in this business, which is recognized, but we don't want that risk to be multiplied by to the power of infinity, because we have to be dealing with a different level of regulation or a different level of laws across different states, and which have penal consequences. So I think that particular demand, so-called the industry, has been addressed through the process of bringing in, first, of course, with the amendment to the allocation of business rules, whereby very clearly this subject has been allocated to the MHA. And thereafter, closed on heels of that, you have these draft rules that have come out for consultation. Clearly, whether or not this is the apt, constitutional, and purely technically legal way of doing it, I think that debate perhaps is not for this panel. I'll just very, very, just touch upon it to say that ideally speaking, the conundrum that we are facing, and which is what was brought out by the Madras High Court and subsequently followed by the Karnataka High Court, the conundrum that we are facing as to what is the scope of the powers of a state legislature under a relevant entry in list 2 to say betting and gambling. And that was interpreted by the courts to say that betting which is in connection with gambling, that is to say that betting which is in the case of games of chance is the only remit on which laws can be enacted by a state legislature. Now that is yet to be finally given a stamp of approval by the Supreme Court, and those matters are in appeal there. So we will find out whether that would be the appropriate solution. But to my mind, purely from a technical, constitutional, legal standpoint, if there was to be a final determination from a legislative standpoint that this subject is going to be legislated and regulated by the parliament, then that ought to have come in the form of a law and not perhaps in the form of these rules that have been notified under the IT Act. So that's one of the aspects. But as I said, for the moment, this was in that sense a quicker, perhaps more convenient way of trying to bring in some relief to the industry. So clearly a positive there. Number two, and I'll just revisit point number one very quickly in the context of a particular rule that is sought to be inserted. But number two is that there was a need for the industry to say, look, we don't want stringent regulations. Ideally speaking, we should have a self-regulatory setup. That also has been answered in the positive. And that's certainly a welcome move for the industry to figure it out amongst themselves as to what works for them in a self-regulatory scenario. Coming back to one, I would say that the reason I think that conundrum between the center and state remains unresolved is because Rule 3, 1B, 9, and 10 bring about this aspect saying that your game must be in the nature of an online game that is it should not be in the nature of an online game, which is not in conformity with any law for the time being in force. Now that leaves it open-ended. If there is a law for the time being in force in India, which is a state law, which seeks to overreach the so-called remit of only regulating gambling or games of chance, then does that fall foul of this, is the first aspect. What makes this perhaps more difficult for us to argue that this is what holds fort and states cannot, to the extent that the state law is contrary to this, it should be not given precedence. The one technical problem is the state legislature, the law enacted by the state legislature will have a higher footing than executive action through rules. So that's one problem. But even there, it doesn't stop with the language which is not in conformity for the law being enforced. It says, including any such law relating to gambling or betting, etc. Right? So it's a much larger genus of laws which could potentially have a conflict with this. My second issue is that whereas the relevant entry of list 2, which was interpreted by the Madras High Court and Karnataka High Court, refers to the 3 words betting and gambling, this provision 9 says is in the nature of an online game that is not in conformity with any other law for the time being in force, including any such law relating to gambling or betting. You have by that essentially created the possibility of a state enacting a law regulating betting for a game of skill, because we all know that there is that element of betting involved, but it is in relation to game of skill. But that clearly then conflicts with this. So what you wanted to actually achieve, which is to give that power to the center, maybe albeit through the rules, that gets defeated here. And then, of course, number 10 just follows up with an omnibus thing that violates any law for the time being in force. So in my mind, if 10 is deleted and 9 is modified to say that that game should not be in the nature of an online game that is not in conformity for any law relating to gambling, that will solve the problem. So that's one area which I identified as a potential ambiguity which could create this issue.
Sure. Abhishek, thank you for your view. So we have a limited time, so let me move on to the next speaker.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely.
So now, last but not least for this session, let me bring in Gowree. So Gowree, you have been in the space for pretty long. You have heard the experts speak. You have identified issues and challenges with respect to what we currently have and what is being proposed by MHA. How do you see this development moving forward in terms of regulation of the online gaming space? So yeah, please, over to you, Gowree. Please share your views.
Sure. I think I'll cut the chase, and I have written several of articles and such submissions. We do need a central law with some use of constitutional tools, because the Karnataka and Madras High Courts have also sort of alluded that even the games of skill could fall under some other entries within the state list, right? So with that in mind, we do need a central law by sort of one way or the other. This, as Mr. Shailendra said, is a stopgap arrangement, at least gives some relief to the industry. And the other aspect, of course, which I believe should be sorted out is the 2 ministries that recently got on board under AOBR, which is the Sports Ministry for Esports. The clear distinction between the ambit of, what MHA will control and what esports, because even in other jurisdictions, I was speaking with some other lawyers, they also said that even in other jurisdictions, this clarity has yet not been established. So it is important for us to even get that clarity. I think number 2, this is a welcome step, as everybody has said, which is an interim measure. At least gives the industry a chance to prove that they can self-regulate and self-regulate very well. They have been doing that for all these years, which has been applauded, even in our conversations internationally, right? But this gives at least some kind of statutory, sort of oversight for them to sort of act in a particular way, right? But with the regulations, I do have problems. There have been many spoken, and in our submissions, we'll talk about many, but because of the time, I'll limit myself to 4 or 5 key. I think this confusion between rule 3, 4, and 4A. 4A says that in addition to 3 and 4, you have to comply with 4A. According to me, the intermediary, and I will not get into that whether it is right for the online gaming companies to be called as intermediaries. Many of us will agree that there is some kind of conundrum there as well. But as I said, this is an interim measure, so let's live with that. And as the OTT industry also has done, there were constitutional challenges for the rules under Part 3 as well. But the OTT industry, at least the OCCPs, decided to just go ahead with the rules, irrespective of the challenges, by the news aggregator, right? So in my mind, even if there are challenges to the rules which may come through, if we sort of all of us put together, sort of want to go ahead with the rules, nothing can really stop us, because ultimately most of it is self-regulation, right? So coming back to the quick 3-4 points, in my mind, the online gaming operators who are really not having features such as chat features that make them intermediaries should not be required to comply with 3 and 4. I'm very clear about it. It is creating confusion. If you want certain of the provisions of 3 and 4 to be also sort of complied with by online operators, please include them in 4 and 4A. But just, by the by, you look at 3 and 4 becomes a problem in my mind.
Secondly, so Gowree, just a question here. So yeah, if the gaming companies just act as a publisher and do not become intermediaries by providing those communication features, so do they come under the ambit of these rules?
If they provided chat features, they anyway were required to comply with 3 and 4.
Right. And if they don't have the chat features?
Yeah, but if they don't have any feature which as two intermediaries, right, they were not required to comply with 3 and 4, right? That is my point. So let there be clarity in that regard in the rules. Second is the regular intermediaries, they have to comply with their rule 3 and MA. I think there is some confusion as to what exactly those intermediaries are required to do. In my mind, they are two, intermediaries such as, advertising platforms and all that. They should be simply required to provide a space for advertising, publishing, or whatever for the online gaming operators, and to declare whether they have been registered, not registered, whatever it may be. It is very difficult for online gaming, so intermediaries to keep checking. So today I'm registered, right, as an online, my online game, and online, the intermediary has checked with me under MA, right? And then tomorrow my game gets re-registered. How is the intermediary supposed to know, right? So I think the obligation on intermediaries should be minimal in my mind, right? They should simply have an ability to provide, that verification or whatever it may be. So that's point number 2. Point number 3, KYC has been spoken, but I just wanted to add about, even in PPI, if you see, there is a small PPI, right? There is very, very, very minimal KYC that is required, right? So I think a graded approach similar to what we have seen in PPI should be adopted. Number 3, I think, earlier, all the, self-regulatory bodies were focusing more on skill versus chance and, sort of having the operators comply with those elements. But I think the law now requires them to also look at the content, right? There may be some SROs may be looking at that, but now there is an onus not only of the skill versus chance or whatever, or compliance with, but it's a wider compliance with law. So I think the rules will have to be revisited to check, on those elements as well. I think the next aspect I want to sort of put out there is the grievance redressal. I think because of 3.4 and 3.2, and then you have a grievance redressal, which is SRO as an appeal. So what you have is an appeal from the grievance redressal. When it comes to the intermediaries, it goes to the committee, right? But if it's a gaming platform, it is going to SRO, right? Now, if there are gaming platforms having chat features or something happening on chat features, then different appeals to different, avenues. So it's creating some kind of a confusion in my mind. If they want, let SROs take complete control of all the issues, on the grievance, right? So I think there is, there is some work required when it comes to the fine-tuning of the rules in relation to grievance redressal as well. I think even the takedowns, right? If you really see 3.1D in that, there is a takedown possible even for states, because some of the members mentioned that, you know, the states may continue to act in a particular way, right? So that particular issue, if not resolved, then also there could be, sort of interference in the manner in which the rules operate. I think the last point again on KYC, there is some confusion in 4A, which is D and E. So if it is KYC, why again are you talking about user verification? Honestly, I didn't understand what do you mean by user verification. That was relevant for your social media platforms, but not really relevant for you here, right? So I think, some of these are drafting issues, but I think the major other issue which Saumya mentioned, right, which is the foreign platforms. So if there is an intention to allow, see, I'm not giving my view positive, negative at all. But if there is an intention to allow foreign platforms, which are skill platforms, I'm no way saying, I'm suddenly jumping into a non-skill, but foreign platforms, because if you see the language in 4A, there is that kind of, they're alluding that, you need a presence in India and all of that. So that means you're already contemplating there may be foreign platforms offering in India, right? You need the presence of a grievance officer in India, whatever it may be. So if there is an intention to allow foreign platforms, skill platforms, to operate in India, then please bring in clarity and FEMA. Because, there is, under the current account rules, because there is that confusion whether the remittance outside is allowed or not, right? Because, this is a larger picture. I think Saumya also mentioned about GST. So I think a lot of other pieces need to fall in place. This is the step in the right direction, but let the speed not, hinder to say that this is done and let's move on. I think this is just a work in progress. Of course, there are, in my mind, even awareness, right? The SRO's job also to create awareness. In my mind, that is the most important part that should be brought in place as well as a responsibility of the SRO, which is not clearly called out today. So I think some of these elements, there are many other, but because of want of time, we are already past time. I can see that on a Friday evening. So I'll just stop here.
Thank you so much, Gowree. And yes, we are over time, but would request if people could stay for another 20 minutes. And thank you, Niyati, for your comment, which KU is looking at. Perhaps other platforms also would be looking at it on this issue. And lawyers, please feel free to put it into the chat. So I go to the open house section. And before I open it out for everyone, first I would like to ask Kazim from the dialogue, because they had done a consultation on the same amendments, to share what their key thoughts is. And after Kazim, I would like to bring in Dipro from the Quantum Hub, who have also done a stakeholder consultation, to share their views. So Kazim, over to you.
Thanks. Thanks, Amrita. I hope I'm audible. Great. Thank you so much. And I'll make it very quick because I know people have Friday plans. So I don't want to ruin those plans by taking a lot of time. But I just get straight into it. So I think, a lot of interesting points have been discussed, so I won't repeat. But just want to sort of focus a little bit on the SRO and, certain sort of suggestions we have in terms of the SRO. I think number one is that, the SRO will play a very important role in terms of determining how skill is applied to various formats and various games. So I think over here, it's critical that a sort of a comprehensive model is developed, which could be based on the jurisprudence developed by the courts, which has been over the last few years. In terms of what is game of skill, but also some sort of a statistical analysis, some sort of a quantitative analysis, which tests and which sort of reviews the games and comes up with some sort of metrics to determine that whether, the predominant skill test is satisfied or not. And both these aspects, the court jurisprudence and this statistical sort of analysis, could be clubbed together to create a model which can then help SROs determine what constitutes a game of skill and game of chance. And this can also sort of once this is developed and practiced and implemented, it can be further improved. And that could inform the future litigation as and when, if and when that happens, in terms of what would be game of skill. So I think that's sort of one suggestion, which I have. Number two is in terms of standards. I think this is already being discussed, but I think because we'll have multiple SROs, we need some sort of standards and procedures to have certain uniformity in terms of how they implement, what is a game of skill, and in terms of their practices. Some sort of code of practices will have to be determined over here. Number three, I think this is something which Mr. Shailendra Singh had also spoken about, that over the SROs, I think another layer may be introduced, could be introduced, and we can look at a government-led structure, like a 3-tier structure beyond the SROs to be introduced, because I think that will also make sure that whatever complaints are coming will then go to that committee, which could be a government-led body, and which could be similar to, I think, what we have in part 3. And also, I think this has been spoken before, but a retired High Court or a Supreme Court judge, I think would be very critical when it comes to the SROs. I think on the SROs, I think this is what I have. KYC, very quickly, it should be done at the time of withdrawal, right? Because I think a lot has been spoken about how onerous it would be to have a level of KYC, which RBI dictates the procedures in the financial sector. I think number two, a lot has been discussed, and it was discussed yesterday also, that KYC as a practice itself is not very foolproof, right? So when we look at KYC, we need to make sure that it's not onerous on the platforms. It's another time of withdrawal, which makes it faster and easier to sort of execute as well. So that's another point. I think there's one critical sort of drafting change which can happen is with respect to, the grievance redressal timeline. So it's mentioned 24 hours, while, in part, I think rule 3, it says 72 hours. So I think that particular clause can be deleted, because I think it should be uniform for gaming intermediaries and other intermediaries. So I think 72 hours could be sort of looked at. Then, of course, I think when it comes to, what do we mean by deposit? What is kind? I think here, what we can look at is something like which is of worth of money or worth of money, or something like that. It could be a drafting change which the government can look into, because defining kind is difficult. It could also mean tokens. So I think there is some sort of ambiguity over there, which I think we need the government to sort of look into. Then I think on just in terms of the implementation, we'll have to also revisit. I don't know if 3 months would be enough. I think in the consultation also we've discussed that more time may be required. So I think that implementation timeline also may be re-looked at this stage. And I think what we also need is adequate time for the companies to verify the users, which will be also critical. So these are sort of very quick points, but happy to discuss more and share more thoughts on this.
Sure, thanks, Kazim. So, Kazim, like you...
No more questions for Kazim now, Rahul.
No more questions. I'm just leading into the next speaker.
Yeah.
Because everybody talked about, the norms for setting of standards by the SROs, or the SRBs rather. And there is this fear that since it is going to be driven by members and it's going to be very heavy, driven by large players, and then if the norms are set, so would it lead to cartelization of developing those SRB standards? And this was also, I think, raised in one of the discussion by the Quantum Hub. So, Yadripro, over to you. Please share your general views and also specifically this.
Yeah, sure. So, and of course, I agree with Kazim and most of the other panelists in that it is a positive step forward. And there's some amount of regulation, etc. What I did want to talk about right now, though, is a question I had, which hasn't been. I've been for these conferences the last 3-4 days, and most of my questions have been answered. I had a question with respect to 3.1 MA, where it seems to build out intermediaries which are not online gaming intermediaries and have certain compliances for them. These are intermediaries hosting, publishing, advertising online games as per the provision. But separately, of course, the online gaming intermediaries definition says entities which offers one or more online game. So I was just wondering that in both of these definitions, any intermediary which is hosting, publishing, and advertising an online game is also really offering it. So how does this differentiation play out? And if it doesn't really differentiate, then it brings in a whole host of like app stores, maybe an entire Facebook, Amazon, etc. So I was wondering if anyone else had thought about this.
So if I may just come here, Deepro, I think this was brought up yesterday in our consultation that, I mean, if you read if you read the definition of, gaming intermediary, basically offer. So what is offer? I think you're right over here. It is very broad and very vague, I think, at this time, because it could be that you're offering. So, one argument was also that, if a game is on a computer, so computer maker, manufacturer, is that manufacturer also offering a game? Because it comes in a lot of mobile phones and computers. If I'm giving a game, like pre-installed games, am I also a gaming intermediary? You mentioned about App Store, Play Store. And then, the question around how do we differentiate between offer on an app store or a Play Store versus an intermediary where the game is actually being played? So I think certain carves out are required for this particular definition. I'm definitely convinced that more discussion needs to happen, because at this stage, it's not clear. It's too broad, and there needs to be some sort of narrower definition for this.
Okay, Gowree or any other lawyers who would want to also take a stab at this?
Yeah, so I don't think the intention really here was to cover, offer in the sense, I agree there is a wording confusion there and some drafting clarity is required. But I don't think there is an intention to cover the real intermediaries on whose platforms game may be offered or advertised, for them to be complying with everything. And that is why I mentioned, if you see what I mentioned, that their obligation should be very minimal. Their obligation should be simply to say that if your platform is being used by other the game publishers, let me sort of use that word, by game publishers to provide their game to the to the end users, then your obligation should be limited to enabling them to provide that verification mark or whatever it may be. Otherwise, it's going to create chaos, for the intermediaries to sort of keep track of what is registered, what is not registered, etc. So, in my mind, if there is a wording clarity to sort of marry the intention, we will, reach at a proper place. But just want to assure that, in my view, there is no intention to cover all the platforms that you mentioned to go beyond that limited due diligence obligation as such. So we should sort of request for a drafting clarity in that regard.
Yeah, I think the intent isn't there, but I think there are a couple of drafting clarifications which could happen. Yeah.
Thanks. Deepro, do you have any other points, or else we will open it up?
Yeah, you can open it up.
Thank you so much. I can see Amira Dhawan's hand. Amira, you can unmute and speak. Just keep it brief, please, and do mention your affiliation.
Yes, ma'am. I'm just a student and I'm very keen on the gaming platform, so I thought of joining in. My first question is whether it's right on the part of the MeitY to recognize online gaming as intermediaries. That was my first question. Second thing I wanted to ask was that there's a provision which talks about Reserve Bank of India, like RBI regulations would have to be followed at the time of registration for account verification. So what is the industry's stance on this? And what is the legal industry stance also on this? Because as far as I understand, RBI is A, very quick in revamping its regulations, and B, will this make it a very tedious process for the gaming industry?
Thank you so much. A very relevant question. Any of the lawyers in the room want to take it?
Or anyone from the industry also?
Yeah, even from the industry, anyone who wants to take it. And by the time you decide who wants to take it, Lokesh has a question or comment. Lokesh, yes, over to you.
Yeah, hi guys. Many thanks. I've been waiting for like 3.5 hours to share my perspective. I think I'm a very confused person here. After hearing all the thoughts and inputs here, because unfortunately, I heard the panel, I heard people, and obviously a lot of people I already know. Everybody is talking about gaming, right? Somebody I think mentioned that gaming worldwide is a $200 billion industry now. But let me kind of remind everybody that today when we talk about gaming, we are worldwide. So worldwide, the $200 billion industry does not include the so-called real money gaming apps of India. When let's say if I talk about how big is the gaming market in US, so they will come up and say, okay, so we have, let's say, Activision, Riot, Microsoft, and they'll combine the revenues of all these video game developers, and they'll say, okay, so US gaming market is this much. And so that is how worldwide that 200 billion, it looks very catchy or a clickbait for our Indian media, people talking about 200 billion worldwide and this thing. And please let me inform everybody that this $200 billion industry is the video game industry. And this worldwide video game industry does not include games like Teen Patti, Rummy, Fantasy, and my request here is that obviously we shared our perspective with Rajiv ji on the meeting which we had held on 11th, that the definition, when we say online gaming, so the dictionary meaning and the meaning of online gaming worldwide means that you play a video game on an electronic device using internet. That's it. In our proposed current amendments, the so-called the India definition of online gaming, we have included that you play an online game by deposit, by putting money with the expectation of money in kind and all those things. So we as a video gamer, I am a video gamer, right? So, I'm very much confused, and not only me, but the so-called that 400 million gamers in India. We are equally confused that what does this mean? Because the definition, अगर हम किताब पढ़ते हैं या दुनिया की बात करते हैं, वहाँ ऑनलाइन गेमिंग तो ये बोली जाती है, एंड उसके चक्कर में प्रॉब्लम क्या हो रही है? मेरी बड़ी हम्बल रिक्वेस्ट है सब लोगों से, whether that's lawyers and everybody, कि there was a mistake which, or there's a legacy which we are carrying on through our Public Gambling Act 1867 or 57, right? Please, just I'm not a lawyer, please correct the year and this thing. So वहाँ पे एक शब्द लिखा हुआ है gaming houses, and that अब obviously उस समय तो किसी ने सोचा नहीं था कि इंटरनेट होगा, computers आएंगे and everything. But now since we have computers and everything, everybody has started saying that okay, so this is gaming. And so you're playing casino, Teen Patti, Rummy, pokers, and whatever. So now
Lokesh, so sorry, if you could limit your intervention because
Sure. No, please, thank you for reminding me. So my request is that let's kind of, as the stakeholders of the industry, we should typically we should look at and we should start calling this as a iGaming industry the way it is defined worldwide. Let's not try to, even in our discussions and everything, my humble request is that we should not use the word online gaming and gaming, because that's not how the rest of the world also understand. Now, problem is that, everybody is talking about online gaming and we are largely talking about, RMG kind of game title. Nobody actually talked about video games. Right.
Okay.
So may I come in quickly to sort of answer this, quickly? So I think, sometimes we need to recognize that the regulation, from a regulation perspective, the government will come in when there is a need to regulate, right? Or to sort of control certain things, right? The decision that has been taken currently is to look at RMG. That does not necessarily mean that others are not, under watch, right? For example, internationally, even for the, the video games, there are age ratings, etc., that are applicable. Right. So maybe if you see Rule 6A, there is clear that even if there is no real money gaming, the government may still come in and regulate if there is addiction or those type of issues. So here we are talking about regulation. And in that context, I understand, Lokesh, what you're saying from a definition. And also, let's not get bogged down by the definitions. Let's look at the intention. So currently, at least this industry is, getting regulated, but the government has the intention. Probably even under 6A, they have demonstrated. Now, whether we should have a separate, sort of age rating, age gating for other type of games which are not RMG, maybe time will tell, and maybe, some of us will start looking at that as well. But that's what should focus on the intention and the mission that is trying to be regulated.
Thank you so much.
6A में जो है 6A में clearly mention है कि जहाँ भी
शैलेंद्र जी, yes please.
हाँ, मेरा ये कहना जो हो रहा था लोकेश जी के कि वीडियो गेम में क्या होता है 6A में लिखा हुआ है कि the ministry satisfied in respect of any game made available on the internet accessible by user through a computer source without making any deposit. उन्हें भी सबको जो भी ड्यू डिलिजेंस है फॉलो करना पड़ेगा. If they are threat to the national security or anything public safety, the action will be taken. तो ये तो compliance जो है regulatory compliances for all.
Okay, I have a counter question to Gowree, because now that these rules define what an online gaming is, and it associates it with making a deposit. So how do you see, next time when we are talking about regulating the larger gaming industry or video games, whatever, how do you then expect to make those changes? Are they, by
I think
looking
that will be from time to time. No, from time to time, they will have added definitions, some other definitions. So I think that's what I said. Let's not get bogged down by the definitions. But 6A, as Shailendra ji said, there is already a foot in the door to regulate those. And maybe, as I said, there is a conversation required even on the non-money games. Wherever there is mischief, wherever there is harm, right? Now, what is harm in 6A? There is no guidance, but PDPD bill talks about what is harm, right? So, those further discussions are required. This is just the beginning. This is the first step. As Dr. Singh said, Shailendra ji said, this is the first step, and immediate need was RMG. But that does not mean we are stopping here. This is the beginning.
Right. Thank you so much, Gowree, for this. And we also believe that this is the first step and one of the many discussions we will have, because it's a long way ahead. And I think we cannot see any more hands or comments, etc. in the chat. Okay, Renu, I see your hand. You're the last one. Please go ahead. Renu, you have to unmute yourself.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to quickly add one point with the caveat that I consult to the industry. So my point of view may be accordingly. So I'm very pro industry. However, one thing is there for the industry already CCI is there. And if any syndicate is formed, if a lot of gaming entities are coming together and some games are created which are having impact in commercial sense on larger public, then obviously already CCI is there. So now, as the previous speaker said, this particular regulation is more towards public awareness and also towards different use cases which would be emerging in the future. So at this junction, whether today as the draft is or in a certain coming time, say for few months, I think keeping things macro would be good, because more and more use cases would be emerging. And as far as commercial aspects in terms of industry are concerned, those things are already there in the law. This would be additional and above to this. So keeping the definitions very broad is better. That would be my point of view. That is it.
Thank you so much, Renu, for sharing this.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for participating, and I thank our industry partner AGIF also. What we would be doing next is we would be having a draft report being prepared. We would be circulating it and also making our submissions. The date is 17th. We hear whispers that it may be extended, but we've not seen it yet. So we still stick to 17th. But thank you so much everyone for participating and joining. In case you have any other points points which you want to share with us, you can put it on a mail to me and Rahul. We will try to, perhaps by tomorrow, so that in case we want to incorporate something else you missed, we would try to do that. So Rahul, anything else you want to say? And obviously this is one of the conversations. We'll have more such conversations because this industry is evolving and we'll have more things to come. So thank you from my end, and Rahul, if you want to add anything.
Just some closing thoughts. Thank you. This has been a very wonderful discussion. Thank you, expert speakers and panelists, for joining us and sharing your views. Thank you, AIGF, for supporting the discussions. A lot of issues that we still see need clarification. We will definitely ask them through our report in form of consultation process to get those things clarified, have more consultation views with experts to form a better suited regulatory model. And in terms of what industry needs to do in terms of building its practices for compliance is, get its act together, find out ways, as Shailendra said, for building trust with the government so that, this model can actually work. And if the SRO model can actually work, the later law, the larger law, might not be as stringent as would have been in the first place, which we do not see. So, so thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you for sharing your views, your questions, and good night. Have a good Friday evening. Bye-bye.
Recording stopped.